And we can hear you.
Unfortunately, I have to use, I'm using an iPad rather than a computer. Still should work.
Never works. I think we're holding on a few more minutes. Just a little early.
Either way.
If you get in early, make sure it'll work.
Oh, yeah, different.
Call the Finfish Advisory Committee meeting to order. The first item is the approval of the agenda. Is there any corrections, deletions, changes to the agenda for this meeting? Hearing none, without objection, unanimously approved. Next is the approval of the minutes of the November 12th Finfish Management Advisory Committee. Are there any corrections, deletions, or changes to the minutes
Mr.
presented?
Brazel, if I can just make sure the people on the phone are able to hear you. Ernie and John, are you able to hear well?
I can hear fine.
You can hear fine?
I can hear fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alexa. And I'd like to remind the members of the committee to use the microphone, bring it close and talk. If you go back in previous YouTube videos, you can't hear people on the YouTube recording. So get the microphone close and please use it. Any corrections, deletions, or additions to the agenda or the minutes of the last meeting? Without objection, we'll unanimously approve. Presentations by staff. Chief Gear, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Excuse me, I have a cold, so I'm kind of dragging a little bit today. We have two presentations today. One on extended drift gillnet management discussions. We've had an experimental gillnet fishery for the last couple of years, and Chris Davis will be giving that presentation, and then we're going to move on to a blue cat management discussion that we started last November. So, and we'll discuss that and let you know where we're going with that. So, with no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Chris, and he's going to give the presentation on the gillnet management decisions.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Davis, and I run the Protected Species Observer Program here. Me and my partner, Brandon Four, were the ones that collected a lot of the data that had to do with this fishery, and I will be presenting that to you today. So a little bit about Spanish mackerel. They're known to grow fast, weighing up to 13 pounds, and can live up to 12 years. They spend their winter off of Florida and move northward to North Carolina in early April and on to New York in June. And as water temperatures cool, they move back down to Florida during the winter again. They're able to reproduce by age 2. From nearly 300 VMRC samples, we've determined that an average size of age 2 fish here is about 19.3 inches. And we've seen a minimum size of 11.9 all the way up to a maximum of 26.4. They spawn from April to September off of North Carolina and Virginia coasts, and the South Atlantic stock is not considered overfished and is not subject to overfishing according to the last stock assessment in 2023. Moving on to look at the commercial harvest and recreational catch of Spanish mackerel in Virginia. We've seen a large increase in both of those since about 2018. The commercial harvest is based on number of pounds, and the recreational harvest is based on the number of fish. So moving on to the extended drift gill netting that we started. Beginning in June of 2022, VMRC began this experimental fishery that specifically targets Spanish mackerel during the summer months from June through September. The project started with 4 permittees in 2024, increased to 5 in 2023, and then increased again to 20 in 2024. Permittees could fish up to 6,000 feet of contiguous webbing, provided that one end of the net was clearly marked with a high flyer and the other end was attached to the vessel while fishing. And this fishing primarily occurred from sunset to sunrise. The stipulations of the permit said that between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. So looking at the harvest of Spanish mackerel from this fishery beginning in 2022, we had 58,979 pounds. In 2023, it was 52,149. And then in 2024, it was 218,930 pounds. So this is a map indicating, the observer program was tasked with conducting observation trips to track feasibility and bycatch of the gear. We provided log books to all fishermen. They provided such data as GPS, soak time, net length, mesh size, bycatch species, and the number of each species. So this shows you a map. All the blue dots are those GPS coordinates that were provided through those log books. I don't know, sorry about that. And the red squares are observation trips. We had conducted approximately 18 observer trips and had 429 self-reported trips in the log books in 2024. So looking a little bit at the different fishing parameters in this fishery, the length of net, the primary one that was used was anything greater than 5,000, which was 41.7% of the trips. Soak time primarily was used between 3 and 4 hours, or 31.2% of trips. Most of our permittees used 3 1/4 inch mesh, but did fish up to 3 1/2 inch mesh as well. So out of the 20 permittees we only had 13 who actually utilized their permits. That was across 421 fishing days combined and 425 different sets. So we had some fishermen that was set more than once a night. And the depth was averaging around 37.5 feet. Looking at what made up the primary harvest, obviously Spanish mackerel was a large part of it, followed by bluefish, spot, Atlantic, menhaden, and bonito. So looking at CPUE, that's the pounds of fish per set. So Spanish mackerel obviously was significantly higher than the others at 515 pounds per set. As far as bycaught species, looking at CPUE, sandbar sharks, which is a prohibited species from NOAA and the federal government. They utilize Chesapeake Bay as a nursery area, so we catch quite a number of small sharks, but 99% of them are released alive, so we don't worry about dead discard from them. Atlantic menhaden came in second, followed by cobia, butterfish, and bluefish. So looking at the whole entire harvesting season, the first set was on June 4th, and the last set was on June 17th. The red line indicates a 7-day average. So the primary portion of this fishery occurs sometime around the 15th of July, all the way up until the bycatch limit was initiated by NOAA. The harvest from the northern zone had reached its quota, so they initiated the bycatch limit of 500 pounds per trip. And that was on August 6th. So looking at all the different gear types that we have that catch Spanish mackerel starting in 2022 to 2024, drift gill net seems to be the primary way that our fishermen are catching Spanish mackerel. And looking at this across the gear types by the graph, the dark blue is pound net, the orange is anchor stake gill net, green indicates drift gill net, so any fishermen that on their harvest reports put drift gill netting as their primary way of catching fish. And then our experimental drift gill net, the light blue, is those that come directly from our permittees. The numbers above each bar are the number of trips taken from those different gear types. So as you can see, our experimental drift gill net does pretty well compared to all other gear types, but any fisherman that does indicate using a drift gill net does catch a large amount of Spanish mackerel as well. The CPUE for this, again, is based on pounds per trip. And then just looking at how well it does with bluefish as well, we don't catch as many poundage looking at harvest reports as anchor state gill nets. But if you look at it as far as CPUE, the pounds of bluefish per trip, our number for our experimental drift gill net is higher than that for anchored state gill net. So some of the feedback that we received from our participants in the fishery was that it seems to be there's limiting factors with participating in this. The availability of the gear can be hard to come by. We do see a large fluctuation in market prices for Spanish mackerel. Speaking to one of our permittees, they saw anywhere from $1 per pound all the way up to $4 per pound, but the average seemed to be about $1.75 per pound across the entire fishing harvesting period. The institution of the date of the 500-pound bycatch limit can be, it varies throughout the entire time frame. We've had it all the way, not initiated till October. We've had it initiated in July. So whenever that comes into effect, it has an effect on whether these guys can fish or not. Crabbing and other gear types may be more lucrative, and there just might not be a reason to use this type of gear to go out fishing. And the fishery itself does lean towards one of our cleaner fisheries we've observed in Chesapeake Bay with minimal bycatch. And like I said, that bycatch being released, mainly the sandbar sharks, released alive due to the short gear soaks. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from the members?
I thought that there was a state code section that said gill nets can't be longer than 1,200 feet.
So this is an experimental permit that we,
But you still have to follow state code even in experimental stuff, don't you?
no.
You have to follow state code, Pat.
We're allowed to, there's also sections of code that allow us to provide scientific collection and experimental gear permits for if we think it would be a valid way of fishing.
So then you have to get state code changed before you make it not an experimental fishery?
I don't think it's in code, I think it's in regulation. I mean, if that's the case, we can't issue any experimental fishing permits then.
That was the length of the net that I was thinking about.
But, you know, in many cases, the reason why we have to issue an experimental fishing permit is because it's not allowed normally under code or regulation. And that's why we do it, and that's why we do it under the premise of a scientific collection permit. And then if we have to, from there, if we get to the point where we're ready to regulate this, then we go ahead and we have to change the code sections and regulations accordingly.
Pat, is everything you're saying being recorded on that? Are you able to,
I hope it is, it always is.
I didn't know if they could hear it, that's why, because he's not talking in the mic. That was a good explanation, that's the only reason I wanted it on.
It's a good point.
So Chris, if I understand correctly, we've only done this for 3 years?
Correct.
The last 3 with 600-foot nets?
6,000.
6,000
Up
foot
to
net.
6,000.
Up to, but what's been the majority of the nets that they've set?
So if we look at that, if you look at catch per unit effort, so amount of pounds per trip by length of net, it would make sense that the longer the net, the higher, the more pounds you're going to catch, and that's what we saw. But again, some fishermen thought that, or fish like, I don't really want to fish 6,000 feet of net. But looking at it across the entire spectrum, we had 145 sets with nets that were greater than 5,000, and we saw 620 pounds per set.
Okay. A few other questions. These have primarily been done up in the bay, up on the Upper Peninsula, off the middle of the bay, basically.
Correct, and we a lot of our fishing does take place up there, but we have seen some fishing off the ocean side of Virginia Beach and the lower portion of the bay as well.
And because this, and explain this floating gill net, how it's marked. Obviously, a boat tethered at one end, a buoy at the other. Anything in between?
No, there's nothing in between. Our fishermen do keep a good job of keeping track of traffic We've had some tugboats that have come into the area, but they've coordinated with them on the radio and let them know. The end of the net does have a high flyer with a light at the end of it. So I know that when Shanna comes up and talks about regulation, there is going to be some indications to determine between what's going to be between the net.
Yeah, Chris, that's an observation from myself, is that if you're off the beach, off the entrance to Chesapeake Bay or out of Rudy, you know, a lot of fishermen go out at night, come back, or go out early in the morning, come back late at night, and with 5,000 feet or longer, with an unmarked net, there's potential for conflict.
I will say the times that I've been out there, which is pretty numerous, there's been minimal boat traffic or instances. You really don't want to be anywhere that you're going to encounter boat traffic because, one, you're risking your own gear and tearing it up or losing a lot of it. So our permittees have done, I believe, a good job of making sure that they avoid any and all boat traffic while they are fishing.
Yeah, it's I guess primarily the recreational anglers that I worry about that may not have a radio if they're under 39 feet, not required. It's kind of foolish not to have one, but you know, running at night, not seeing a net and running over it, damaging the gear, which you don't want, or potentially damaging another vessel, you don't want that either. And that's only my question about where it's done, and the fact that it's mostly done at night, extending it greater than 5,000 feet, that's only an observation from mine, is that it'd be pretty hard to see a, you know, 6,000, 10,000 foot net in the water if it's not marked in some fashion. And if there's a thought on that, I'd love to hear it, but that's my only question.
Shanna's going to come up because that was one of the things that I mentioned.
Like,
Is it floating or sunk? Net?
It's mostly floating. It does float a little bit beneath the surface. You don't see, like, the floats are not directly on top of the water. There's a little bit submerged, but for the most part, it is higher in the water column.
In the Virginia waters and in the Potomac that I gill net in, I use jugs, Clorox bottles in different colors, hung from the net to help prevent boats from hitting it, because then they'll see it.
Yeah.
yeah, but no instances of vessels.
I've talked to, and I've been out with a lot of our fishermen, and they have rarely, if ever, had any instances where their gear has been run over or had any problems.
Any other questions?
Yes, could we go back to the slide that gives a comparison with the recreational catch versus the commercial catch?
Yes, sir.
So you don't believe or feel like that's having any impact on the recreational fishermen with the amount of catching?
No.
Chris, any concern from the commercial watermen about if they extend the net, they increase their catch per unit effort, how it affects their market, or is it?
Yeah, so like I said, that is one of the limiting factors, is that if you do flood the market, then it doesn't become, it's not worth fishing because the price will go significantly down. You then are not covering your fuel costs, your first mate costs, everything like that. So again, it really only comes down to, is it worthwhile for me to go out and catch them? Because I'm going to get the price that I need in order for it to make it worth my while.
And they want to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, because this gives them something to fish on during the summer months in a time when there's really nothing else going on. We've seen, like you can see on the graph, we've seen an increase in Spanish mackerel within our waters. So it does provide an opportunity to work throughout the summertime.
Are we trying to extend the net, or is 6,000 what we're going with? Do the boats want-
6,000 is what we're going with. We're not going anything longer than 6,000.
And that's what the experimental fishery has been?
Correct.
So basically, we're just, because it looks like it's working. It
Yes.
looks like there's not user conflict. It looks like everybody's happy. Nobody wants, traffic either way. The recreational guys don't want to run into, the commercial guys don't want their gear tore up either. So it looks like a good fishery to me. Just observing it.
Absolutely, Mr. McDowell. That's absolutely right.
Okay.
So you mentioned with the bycatch with sharks.
Mhm.
You were saying it was a shorter net as far as the percentage of the higher mortality?
Yeah, it's short soak times. The soak times go anywhere from they can go from 1 hour up to 4 hours, just depending on what the fishermen would like to do. But our guys usually pull in their nets anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and that short soak times allows bycatch to just sort of be released because it hasn't been sitting in a net for hours upon hours at a time. Our largest amount of bycatch that we see, as far as cumbersome, are sandbar sharks, which are released. 99% of them are released alive.
And how long is that net, or how big is that net?
It's up to 6,000.
6,000.
It's the same net. Like I said, some fishermen will fish shorter than 6,000. They just don't feel a need to put all that net out. Some fishermen will fish shorter soak times. It depends. When it came time for them to implement the 500-pound bycatch, there was no point in putting out a bunch of net because you were ending up having to discard a large amount of Spanish mackerel because you were only allowed to keep up to 500 pounds. So they fish really smart.
What was the reason to do it at night instead of during the day?
If you fish during the day, then one, you can use your conflicts. You're going to come across a lot more boat traffic, but also if you leave that stuff out in the water during the day, it's just going to turn to mush. So at least at nighttime, the waters have cooled down. It's easier to work, and it works better at nighttime.
Tom, did you have something?
You said one of the bycatch is cobia. Is that counted against the commercial cobia quota, or is it released alive?
They're released alive.
Okay.
I was saying, market-wise, nighttime is a whole lot better. It's just, Spanish mackerel is a soft fish anyhow, so if it does not see the sun or the light of day, it makes for a much better product.
And the fishermen do a great job of slurrying the ice and the fish so that they come in and they're really nice looking fish.
Right, well, it has to be down to temperature because of HACCP, so they have to keep it on ice.
Yeah.
When it's checked in the dock, I think it's, 45 degrees or below, so, yeah, they do an excellent job with that.
Any other comments, questions from the committee? This time I'll open it up to the public for any comments on this matter. Any?
We've got a quick one-slider.
Well, we'll be going over the regs, so if you have questions about this specifically.
About what we've covered up to now?
But then we're gonna go over the reg.
I think everybody wants to speak after we hear the presentation.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you're good. Just before we go any further, Tom, we pulled up that code. It's for fixed fishing devices. It's not for drift gill nets.
Right, so I realized that after I spoke, I looked it up too.
Yeah.
But, so the only regulations that you have about length is the licensing regulation, which this is getting around because it's experimental.
Well, we also have regulation itself, but that's what we're gonna be modifying.
Yeah.
So we don't have to modify code. Okay, so, I've got one slide. So essentially what we're gonna be talking about today is what we are proposing to put into the regulation. These are just suggestions from staff based off of the information that we've collected from the fishery over the last few years. But all of this is open to, of course, the committee to comment on as well as the public. So a lot of this is actually what they already got to see in their experimental fishing permit. So first of all, we're keeping it in the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay and coastal Virginia waters up to 3 miles. The season is a little bit different than the one that they saw in their experimental permit, and that was kind of based off of what we were seeing and when the mackerel were being caught. So we're recommending right now a season of June 1st to September 15th. The timing stays the same, as Chris was mentioning. The timing was from sunset to 8 a.m. to, again, ensure lack of user conflict and making sure that we're, putting out the best product forward. This was staying within 100 yards of the net was also a part of their experimental permit. If something comes up and they need to unattach from the net quickly, there's some sort of emergency, we don't want that net just being completely unattended, and so we also kept this in. It obviously isn't a big deal when they're actually attached to the net, that will be much closer. So we've actually spoken to some of the fishery. We have a couple of additional safety measures that are being recommended outside of the gill net regulation markings that we already have and are already in regulation. So these additional safety measures are consistent with what you see in the Coast Guard regulations, specifically for commercial fishing. And this is what the fishery has actually brought to us and asked that we consider adding to the regulation. So those additional safety measures are adding 2 all-round lights in a vertical line, with the upper light being red and the lower light being white. The base of the bottom light should be 7.5 feet above the water line. And then the end marker flag must have a light. This was suggested by the fishery because obviously they want to make sure that they are going to diminish any sort of user conflict while they're out there at night. This is a very well-known way of marking when you're commercially fishing at night, and so the fishery brought this to us and asked that this also be added to the regulation. I know they have a couple of other suggestions that they'll probably be bringing forward to y'all today. And then additionally, this was also part of the permit. We want to make sure that our observers are able to get out there and sample on the vessels. So that's another thing that we'd like to add regulatorily.
Shauna, the all-around lights is a Coast Guard federal regulation. The end marker flag must have a light. Mm-hmm. What kind of light? White light, flashing light, steady light? Can you expand on that?
So what we're seeing is most of it was blinking light was what was recommended. We're flexible, again, if this is something, whatever the fishery feels like is going to be useful to them, that they're already using, etc. We're a bit flexible on that, but that was one of their suggestions, and I believe that it was blinking is what they suggested.
Got a question.
Yeah, Mark.
Have they talked about radar reflector for their end buoy at all?
Yeah, I think there's some suggestions as well for that.
Like either or?
Yeah, look, that's a great suggestion that we're, again, happy to add.
Because sometimes, lights may not work.
Yeah.
A radar reflector.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions?
I have. Trying to wrap my head around this mile-long net. How far below the surface is the top of the net when it's deployed? Is it
Chris
right
had some
at the
stats on
surface, or is
that.
it something a small boat can just run over and miss?
From what I see, primarily the net is anywhere from 2 to 3 feet below the surface. It just depends on wave action, how well your floats keep the net up. So there's a lot of factors, but most of the time I would say it's right around 2 or 3 feet underneath the surface.
So a small boat has a chance of going over it
I would say so, yes.
without ripping the net up.
All right, if there are no more questions, I'm guessing the fishery has quite a bit to say. So if we want to move on into the public comment section, I will be here taking notes.
Yeah, so first off, let me rephrase what the staff recommendation is, and that is to extend the drift gill net to 6,000 feet, no greater than 6,000 feet, with the markings that you talk about, the U.S. Coast Guard required markings for red and white all around, and an end light on the tail end, I guess the end marker light, and that might you'll define later when it comes before the commission whether this is a flashing, steady, you know, whether it has a radar reflector, high flyer type, that was commented, look into that. And that's and the season that you recommend here, June 1st through September 15th.
Yes.
And the timing sunset to 8 a.m. That's the staff recommendation for public comment, okay?
Yeah, and we're willing to take all. Yes, it is establishing a new license. Who's asking? Oh, yeah, no, yes. So
absolutely.
it's going to be a new license, just so everyone is aware. We'll have to go into our license regulation as well.
Okay,
and
it'll be
add
new
that.
experimental license?
No, it's not gonna be
It'll be a
experimental,
new
as
license.
this is being added to our GillNet regulation. All of these recommendations, and obviously what we'll be talking to the fishery about. And then we'll have to enter into our licensing regulation and create an extended drift GillNet license.
Okay, hang on a second. Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah, considering we'd like to make sure this doesn't get hit by private boats, how tall is the 6,000-foot net?
So most of the time, the net is about 80 meshes deep, which usually ranges around 6 feet or so in length from the float line down to the lead line.
And are most of the fish caught in the upper part of the net or the lower part, or is it?
I mean, they can be found all throughout the entire net. I mean, it's not sort of the lead line or the float line. I mean, they can be found throughout the whole entire thing. It just depends on where the school is coming through at.
You have a question? Yes, sir.
A Class A and a Class B GillNet license, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Class B goes up to 5,000 yards of net, correct?
6,000 feet.
6,000 feet, okay.
And this is gonna be separate from those
So
licenses,
anybody-
different license.
So,
And anyone can get this license.
And there, I'm sorry, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Tom?
And there will be no limitation on how many people can get the license?
Correct. This
And will
is,
there be a requirement that they use a license, or will this be a free-for-all to get a bunch of people to buy the license and just hold on to it? Because one day you're gonna put a restriction on it, and they'll wanna sell the license. And those things come to mind, and are we gonna take, I mean, and this wanes back to peeler pot days. Back in the early 2000s, they said, we're gonna allow peeler pots, or late 1990s, we're gonna allow peeler pots. And they added a bunch of new gear to go in the water, and they didn't take any gear out of the water when they did that. And that's kind of when the blue crab fishery got a little more overcapitalized and things started going downhill. May not be related, but it happened. So you aren't gonna take away any of these Class B, I guess it is, licenses?
it's gonna be a
Or
completely
permits.
separate license. It will not have restrictions.
But again, I am concerned that it's gonna be a free-for-all and get too many people in, although it takes gear and boats and all that to handle it. And would suggest that you start out with some kind of limited number, more than what you've got in the experimental fishery, but not infinite. And then see how the fishery goes, and then see if you wanna grow the fishery more than that.
Yeah, I think the point of this fishery, though, is it's going to be limited by the number of people who want to get into it, as well as what the market looks like. So as of right now, we are recommending that it be an unrestricted fishery. If that's a suggestion that you have, Tom, we're happy to take that to the commission.
I am concerned about the concept of people, how much will the permit cost?
We've not decided that yet.
Okay, let's say the permit cost $100, which is a lot for a permit here. I would think that you would get a number of people just to buy it, just to get the license. I'm not talking about people who are going to be in the fishery right off the bat and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about people who are doing it as a gamble that this will be of value later to sell. And that's my concern. And so the other thing that you could possibly do to avoid that is to make it a non-transferable license as part of the deal.
But what difference does that make at the end of the day? I mean, I think we're losing fishermen, as, you know, like back when people were peeler potting, we had a lot younger group of fishermen. These guys are all getting older. We're trying to get younger people into this. I don't think.
These guys out here don't look old.
And I think we have comments to everything y'all are saying as well.
But I'm just saying, I agree with, I think we just need to see who wants to get in it, let them get in it, we'll deal with that later if it's a problem. I don't think we need to put a number on something that we don't know about yet, in my opinion.
Well, I would think that we would want to have before you could renew that you used. But let the guys out there talk to that maybe.
We've also got a couple of committee members that still have questions and comments.
This is just a gear license. This is not a permit, correct?
Just a gear license.
So let's say in June 1st, I take a 600-foot, 3 1/4 inch gill net that I use to catch menhaden. And June 1st, I set it out, just out past Windmill Point Light. And I catch Spanish mackerel, and it's my anchored gill net license. Is that okay?
Yeah. We're not stopping any other gill nets from going out there and catching Spanish mackerel. We're just creating another gear type that can be used.
Just the last piece on the permit. So I get my gill license permits by going to an agent. Pay $10, I get 5 of them. Would this be through the agents, or you have to come down here to get it?
We would want this to go through the agents. Again, we haven't formed this license just yet, so that's gonna be a discussion that we'll obviously have with our licensing department.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Can I speak now, please?
Yes, of course. Ernie would like to speak, if we can allow him to go.
I believe there's just too much attention paid to this 6,000 feet. Virginia law allows me to fish with a Class A gill net license, 10 nets, 1,200 foot apiece. So that's 12,000 feet, twice as much. I could do that all day, that is where you would have conflict during the daylight hours and stuff. I fished for Balsa mackerel like this years ago offshore. I've never participated in this fishery, and I won't participate in it in the future either, but I think you're doing a big service for everybody because you're getting people in different time zones. You'll have recreational will have all day, and the commercial will be there part of the night, and I think you'll reduce the conflict quite a bit. And one thing that controls the price of Spanish mackerel more than anything is availability in North Carolina. They're the main source of the fishery, and if they're catching a lot, the price is down. And last year they didn't have a very good season, and the 500-pound triplet may come in later than usual. So I think the 6,000 foot is really not as concerned as much as you think, because legally they can set 12,000 feet, put weights on it. They could have 10, 1,200 foot net. They'd be separated. You wouldn't know necessarily where they were. We have to have a reflective tape, but you have to have a spotlight to see them with reflective tape. This is basically how we used to fish for Boston mackerel years ago. One end fastened to the vessel, one end went to the light. So the difference is when we did that, we pulled the first 50 phantom. If it had a few fish, you run it back out. You wait an hour, you do it again. If it had a few fish, you do it. And then after maybe 3 or 4 hours, you go ahead and haul it in. But if you didn't have anything in that first 50 phantom, you would take up and leave. And I just think this is a good system to get separation between the commercial and recreational sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie. John, did you have a comment?
I do not.
Okay.
Any others? We'll open it up to public comments on this issue.
They need to come up and state their name.
Yes.
Yep, you need to come up, state your name in the mic, talk at the podium.
Hello, I'm Jacob Jewell from Reedville, Virginia. I did have a permit last year and experimented right much in the fishery, and look forward to it. Like you say, it's a clean, sustainable fishery, in my opinion. One of the main concerns I have looking at what we've proposed is the June 1st, or is the season as a whole in particular. I I'd like to see that back end push some too, definitely, but definitely the June 1st deal. I realize that that's when most of our fish were caught, according to the graphs and, you know, the attention given to the fishery, but that's not necessarily indicative of what it's going to be every year. Y'all are fishermen, you understand market price, the weather being versatile in May. We need to have the opportunity to be able to target this fish in the month of May for sure. Personally, I'd have to talk to some of these fishermen. You know, I don't want to speak out of turn. My recommendation would be May 1st, you know, open it up. I don't see really how we're doing anything, you know, different there as far as main boat traffic or instances. But it's important to be able to catch the fish when they are worth something and when the weather allows versus, you know, everybody targeting it once and glutting the resource. So I hope that we can discuss the season more in depth and kind of get a, you know, more cohesive opinion on what that might look like. The comments about whether it be an open fishery or not, that's not my decision to make. My opinion on it is we're young, you know, I don't want y'all older generation to box me out of a fishery. You know, I just got a permit, I'm a younger guy. But at the same time, this is a little bit different, and this fishery does have its challenges with having net on the surface and a lot behind the boat. I think that we might have some regulations. It's like the light. The lights being in the air, a certain elevation. We're gonna limit some of the people that might just be going out and getting a license and maybe not necessarily have the right boat or the right equipment to be out there and do it safe at the same time. I think the fishermen that we have are doing it and doing it the right way, and maybe we have one or two regulations that you might hear that will increase that, you know, to keep some of that. I'm not trying to keep anybody out, but you kind of have to pay to play a little bit too. You got to have your gear in the right order and, you know, have your stuff together. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, good.
I'm talking to a couple of guys at the ocean front, and they said the same exact thing. It's very temperature driven, and they said the same thing where they like to have the month of May through the month of September.
I had a couple phone calls too on the way over, a couple boats that, when they finished dog fishing, wanted to go out of Rudy Inlet and wanted to go down and fish in the ocean for them as well. So I would be supportive of May 1st as well.
I'd like to see them keep dog fishing.
Well, technically it runs out April.
I know.
Due season starts May 1.
I mean, what's the point of a season? I mean, everything is driven by weather. You know, we have this problem in crab potting. We have season, and we're forced to go March 17th, when the day before, we can get a whole lot more money for our crabs. So honestly, I'm totally against the season on this. Let weather dictate when you can and can't go. That's how I see it. You haven't had any user conflicts. This fishery is a proven fishery in North Carolina. They've been doing this down there for years. And I honestly don't see a problem with this.
Yeah, we understand, Mark. Some of the things that we're hearing, though, folks are a little bit worried about catching that end part of the striped bass spawn. So the May 1st is a very good compromise, I believe, that we're happy to bring forward to the commission. We
But most of the
understand.
fish, most of the rockfish being caught are larger rockfish, correct? So, and they're using, what, 3 1/4, 3 3/8 nets? How many rockfish are you really gonna catch that are spawners? Is my question.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah.
To none.
But nonetheless.
You're not gonna gill them, the net's too small, you're gonna lip hang them. And so the fish most likely are gonna be alive.
Yeah, I hear you. Nonetheless, it's
Mortality rate, I'm
just,
quite sure would be very low.
we're in a very bad space with
Correct.
striped bass, so the thought process is let's not push our limits. If May 1st is something that the fishery can work with, we can most certainly bring that forward to the commission.
I think that would be a plus.
Yep, no problem.
Any other public comments? Come on up, sir.
I'm John Balderson. I'm probably one of the first people that started this experimental permit. I was one of the first out of the 4 that was started it. As far as the rockfish thing, I don't think you have a problem with that. I typically try a little bit every year. I'll start maybe in the middle of May toward the end of May and try it. And we don't catch enough Spanish sometimes to make it, but I've yet to catch a rockfish. Haven't done it yet, the whole time. As far as the season, I don't think it needs to be a season. I agree with Mark. When the fish are there, we go to work. When they leave, we go find something else to do. That's just pretty much the way we do everything when it comes to gillnet. As far as the safety issues, I talked to Pat a couple times before. Maybe I use the AIS on my boat. Even when I had an inspection a couple weeks ago, I asked them about maybe even an AIS buoy being placed on the opposite end of the net, but I don't know how federal code would come into play on that. But that's something that would mark, you can see it, if anybody's got an AIS on the boat, you can see me, you can see the other end of the net. I don't know if that's something VMRC could check into. And I guess there's several other things that probably I'm not thinking about, but if you guys got any questions.
Where do you primarily fish, Captain?
I'm pretty much at a New Point, from New Point up, but I plan on going to Virginia Beach this year. And I know that you'll probably want to be down there before 1st of June to be able to fish.
Yeah, my observation, my comment about the AIS is it's great. It's a great system, but it might be cost prohibitive for some folks. I applaud you having AIS on your vessel. On my personal vessel, I have AIS transponder, so everybody sees me until I get to my famous fishing spot, and then it goes cloaked. But it's a good idea, but I think it'd be cost prohibitive to a lot of commercial watermen to do something like that. But high flyers that were mentioned and lights, that's something that could help minimize the risk of somebody getting tangled in a net.
It should be mandatory for a VHF radio, because you have to be able to communicate with traffic. For sailboats, tugboats, you got to be able to talk to them.
I'm a commercial captain, I agree with you, but vessels under 39 feet, recreational vessels, don't require a radio. And it makes no sense to me. I got plenty of radios, satellite phones, AIS transponders. You're gonna find me out there. But not everybody has that. And the other comment I'll make is that at sunset, you're likely to get less recreational traffic at the midnight hour than most times during the summer. But it's that after dark couple hours that you might have people transiting that I'm concerned about. But from what I've heard, it sounds completely doable with not a lot of risk.
The only other thing I see too is the 8 a.m. I typically don't have a problem with that. If we make a set, typically say in the morning, maybe I'll run it at 5 o'clock in the morning and I don't take it, say till 6:30. If I get stuck up with fish, it doesn't give me a lot of time to pick out 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pounds of fish if I'm lucky enough to catch it. Most of the time, this scenario will work. It's just that maybe once or twice it won't. What do we do? I mean, then I'll be against the law. That's the only thing you might want to consider too, maybe 9 o'clock or whatever. We're not going to fish during the day. I mean, it's just retrieving the nets. It might take a little longer sometimes, but typically you'll be fine.
Mr. Chairman, question on that last point. Would it be a reasonable thing to say you have to start working the net, pulling it out of the water by a time somewhere before 8 o'clock, where you'd normally be done by 8? So and you pick a time, but I'm going to say 6 o'clock.
Nobody's going to wait till 8 o'clock to start taking the net. I can assure you that.
So if they start working the net, they have to be, and this is the staff how you state it, you have to be working to pull the net out of the water by 6 a.m.
And if I haven't retrieved it by 8 a.m., I won't have much left overboard to get. It's just, I'm not going to have 6,000 feet of net overboard at 8 o'clock in the morning unless I break down and can't get it on the boat.
Right, but that's the point. If industry guys could say, this is the time we have to start working it, then if an officer goes by and he sees you an hour after that, he can ask you why you're not pulling your net out.
What about the rare instance that happens and you could call in? You know, if there's something, if there's a medical emergency, if something happens, where you could just make a call in to try to get a hold of operation and say, hey, we just ran into this problem. We're going to be a little bit, if you communicate that ahead of time, would that work with the VMRC? As far as, that way we don't have to put anything, You know, it's just a common sense
Right.
thing that, you know, hey, we got stuck, and you get ahead of it and let them know for those few instances.
Gotcha.
Make it simple. Could regulation read actively fishing by 8 AM? I mean, keep it simple to me. I mean, you know, rather than say you have to be fishing by 6, but your net has to be.
I personally look through all the logbooks and nobody's fishing past 10 o'clock. They're done by 10 o'clock. I mean, I'd say 90% of it's done by 9 a.m. They're either going out right after dusk and fishing till 2 in the morning, or going at 4 and fishing till 7, 8 in the morning. So 8, 9 o'clock is probably fine. I mean, I can't remember what the permit said. What did the permit say?
The permit's at
I think the permit said 8.
Have to be done by 8.
Yeah, it just said, you know, fishing from, that's all it said, just fishing from sunset to 8 a.m.
Yeah, because I know there are rare occurrences when that happens.
But the majority of the effort, you know, from what they provided to us, they were done by 9 o'clock.
So actively fishing.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
I think Scott's comment is right on, that if you run into a exigent circumstance that you've got, you know, striped bass snagged in the net or sharks or whatever, and you're taking extra time to pull the net, that, you know, you call the Marine Operations Center and say, you know, I've got my hands full here. And I would think that you'd be covered, that, hey, look, I called somebody, tell them that I'm taking a little bit more time to get my gear pulled, and you're done, you know. So I don't think that's an issue, though, personally. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'd like to take a second to thank the staff for the time they put into this to get us this far. I was, along with John, one of the first handful of permits that was issued.
Name?
Nathan Everett. And this, when I brought it to Pat and Adam and Chris, I believe, as an experimental gear permit, it wasn't anything we were inventing. You know, this is something that's been going on from Texas all the way around the Horn there in Florida up to North Carolina for 20, 30 years. And Virginia just needed to catch up and get on board. So as far as I know, if being from North Carolina and fishing down as far as Florida in the federal Spanish mackerel fishery, these regulations are above and beyond any other state as far as that's concerned. I've never fished in a state where there was a mandatory time where you had to have the net out of the water, or even a season in a state water that you could use a particular gear. I'm still having a hard time understanding who even came up with the idea of having a season on the gear type. Because this gear has been used in several states for several decades, because it is such a clean and efficient way of fishing. You can utilize other fisheries besides Spanish mackerel and bluefish. For instance, the ribbon fish. And the whole reason that Virginia and these guys, you know, we wanted to bring this to Virginia was because croakers in the spot were moving on north, and the Spanish were filling in behind them. Well, the ribbon fish are coming next. I mean, that's just one example. And this floating gill net would be a really good tool to have, but it would be outside of those dates of June to September. So that's the biggest red flag that I see right here. 9 a.m. is a much more reasonable number to have the gill net out of the water. Just give, for instance, we got 6,000 feet over. Nobody's going to start hauling until at least sunrise. Maybe 30 minutes before, depending on how well you think you're doing. You want at least 2 hours after the sun comes up to clear your gear. I think that's at whatever time, because the sun doesn't come up obviously at the same time every day. It's going to be 6:30 sometimes, so you need at least 2 hours. I think 9 a.m. is a little more reasonable. And sunset, I want my gear over by sunset. You know, I don't want to just start setting at sunset. You set 6,000 feet, it takes about 45 minutes. By the time you get back there and get all your buoys and everything straight, it doesn't actually take that long to run the net out. But anyway, I would say 30 minutes to an hour before sunset to be able to deploy the weapon.
would make sense. I want my net in the water when the sun's going down. I think if you get observers to, tell you a little more detail about it, there's certain times as fishermen we've learned when the fish are hitting and when they're not. Somebody mentioned something about the lights and the radar reflector. I think both are a very good idea. We as fishermen want to be seen as much as anybody else out there, especially at night. And I recommend that we all that this goes into effect. Whatever boat you're fishing adheres to all these safety measures, and as well as the gear type regulations, so that the bigger traffic can pick us out as they're coming up and down the bay, like the fish boats and the barges and the ships and stuff, because it's going to be a fishery that is going to carry us on. I mean, it's what's replacing what we don't have anymore right now. And as far as another note to the season thing, I mean, I just came back from a workshop up in Massachusetts. It was a week-long deal NOAA put on. They got so much information, so much science that shows that these water temperatures are getting here sooner, leaving later. So are the fish. Just another reason that I still don't have any idea why there would be a season on the gear type, because that gear type it's much superior to anything we've been using in Virginia in the past. Much more efficient, much less impact with endangered species, the whole 9 yards. I'm also in touch with the bottlenose catch take reduction team, so I could answer any questions you got on some of that stuff. But I'd like to take the time to thank everybody for the effort they put in to get us this far anyway.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. One more thing. We do go into the federal regulations goes out as soon as the quota is caught, and then there's a state implemented bycatch. The way it's written right now is not the ticket. That is not the way to go. 500 pounds on is not the answer. We have tried our best to gauge how to go to only catch 500 pounds when we go into that, but sometimes you don't catch 500 pounds, and then other times you would catch too many. So there's a whole lot of dead discards. We, as fishermen, have asked that we change the bycatch, which is a state regulation, or the state can dictate how that works. I don't believe they have to really ask any permission from anybody else. So if we're asking the state of Virginia to implement a weekly allowance with a 1,500 pound possession limit per day and no more than 4,500 pounds per week within a 7-day period. And we would ask that the dealers and the fishermen both work together, similar to the speckled trout rule as far as reporting, so that Marine Patrol has a way to patrol the situation. As far as if they come up on you and you got 1,500 pounds in the boat after the bycatch has been implemented, they can look back in your records and say, okay, well, you're good to go, and you can catch another 1,500 tomorrow because you haven't got your 45 for the week yet. We'd be glad to work with fisheries on this and discuss it further, but it's definitely going to be the next thing that we have to iron out in this fishery, because like I said, the 500 pounds is not the answer. The whole reason we're here is so that we can all fish and feel comfortable when we're fishing. The last thing any fisherman wants to do is go out there and feel like he's a criminal. We don't mind adhering to the federal regs, but I think common sense, since this is not it's not like you can just stop. We don't want to kill a bunch of fish for anything. It's something that the councils can put their heads together and I think come to a good conclusion. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Nate. We really appreciate it. He's been super helpful in speaking with us about what they'd like to see in this regulation. I do want a small clarification on that bycatch. So it is a federal rule. The issue is that there's an FMP that was supposed to contain that information through ASMFC. This is a jointly managed species, so this is one that it's managed by the councils and by ASMFC. The omnibus FMP that goes into state waters is very vague as to what happens when federal waters close. So we've been asked specifically by the ASMFC to please implement this 500-pound bycatch that the rest of the Spanish mackerel states to the south of us also implement. So Virginia and Maryland both agreed with ASMFC to go ahead and implement those in our regulations. That's to try to maintain some sort of consistency. This was an oversight in that FMP. I anticipate that that FMP is going to be opened sooner rather than later. I hear quite a bit of chatter regarding the allocation between the southern region and the more northern region that starts at North Carolina. So I expect there to be changes soon. It's not a bear that staff is going to recommend to poke right now because, again, we wanted to maintain consistency with that federal FMP.
Okay. Thanks, Shauna. Any other public comments? Okay, matters before the committee.
A question for Shannon. Do we need a season? I mean, why do we need that? Because, you know, trout used to drive me nuts when we had trout season because there were all the trout here you wanted. When trout season opened up, they disappear. Yeah. So, you know, that just, I hear what they're saying there. Do we need that?
Yeah, I think those are really excellent points, and that's definitely something that we can bring forward as a suggestion. Obviously, all of your recommendations will come forward as this develops into a regulation. So I agree with what I'm hearing. I just can't make any promises, obviously, but I completely understand, especially given changing water temperatures, et cetera.
Let Mother Nature dictate.
Yep. Yep, I hear you, for sure.
Okay, a number of notes. Bycatch. Earlier you said bycatch is turned loose. Then you said, oh, we're gonna maybe be targeting ribbonfish also. What is the real, what are you planning on putting in regulation
Hey guys,
regarding?
someone's phone is ringing on the phone, so Ernie or John, if you could just mute yourself. That'd be great, thank you.
It's independent of, okay, sure, but the reason, and I'll give you follow-up questions will kind of explain why I'm asking, but go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, you can ask your question again.
Okay, so the question is, what about bycatch? And I'll tell you, my real concern is not you guys that are out in the main stem of the bay in 30 feet of water, 40 feet of water.
No, let's address it just like you said it.
Okay. The question is, what about bycatch? What are the actual restrictions going to be in regulation regarding bycatch in this fishery?
And from what I understand, bycatch in the experimental fishery was retained or could be retained just like any other gillnet fishery. So I don't want you to be confused when we use the word bycatch, especially talking about after the federal season's closed.
Okay, and that's why I'm asking, just so
Right,
I can
yeah,
make sure
that's
I
why I
understand.
think make
But
sure you
staff
get you
did
on the right page.
staff did say that if you caught a cobia, it would get turned back.
So if that, and that's why I'm back up here talking, not staff. The small cobias would be
Returned because they're too small, yeah.
Correct. If he's a keeper, then we keep him.
Right, you keep anything that's legal.
Okay.
Same
So-
for the ribbonfish, same for the bunkers, same for the.
Okay, and so that's fine. So then the other part of the question becomes, how are you defining the main stem of the bay and where this gear is legal? And the reason I ask that is because I could easily see somebody taking this into shallow water, like Ernie has talked about them doing up off of Chincoteague, going along the beaches and stuff with a really long net.
That's
And
easy. That's real easy. You're not going to set this net where you need it to, where you want it, where you're talking about.
You're not going to set this net.
Well, you can't. You're not going to be able to retrieve it because it's physically not possible to set the floating net that's too deep in shallow water without ripping it up. If you did it, you won't do it but one time.
Okay, I mean, I believe they do something like this for spot up off the beach on the eastern shore, where they take nets. Ernie has talked about it at past meetings, where they take nets and drift it up, and then they pull it in at the end of the drift, and then they come back and they get in line, and they all work their nets along the beach, perpendicular
That's,
to the beach.
yeah, it's another term
Yeah,
for
and-
it in another state. Yes, like stop net, but it's totally different. It is different.
That's
Different
fine.
gear.
And that's why I was asking, and the third question is, I believe state code says you can't use a gill net in a channel. How are you dealing with, in regulation, and how you're gonna deal with this fishery?
That's a regulation.
With the big channel, with the shipping channels and such?
They have to avoid the channels.
Okay, so they have to stay out of the shipping channels, which is good for them, because a ship or tug comes through, it's gonna trash their net.
The only thing we're changing is it's a longer gill net. I'm quite sure all the walls are already set in place as far as the channel goes, you know, where you can and can't set.
Yeah, I'm just,
I mean, it's, you know, I think somebody already said it. You could take 1,200-foot nets and set them side by side by side by side.
200 feet apart.
200 feet apart, okay? What this was is intended to put them together because there was a concern, they were targeting Spanish mackerel and bluefish. They felt that the smaller nets, if they were keeping it attached to their boat, the engine noise and things like that were affecting the catch. So by having a longer net, they could avoid that. So, and yes, they are allowed to keep the bycatch if it's of legal size. We've documented everything. They gave us great information on what they kept, what they discarded, why they discarded it. Was it mutilated? Was it undersized? Or whatever the case may be. So we have all that information. And we will continue to do observance studies, just like we do with all of our fisheries.
Plus, you don't want to be chasing around individual drift nets. You want them tied together. You don't want to be,
Yeah.
you can't monitor them. It'd be a nightmare. You have to tie them together.
Yes, sir.
Can I suggest we take the season right off of it?
I've got that already, George.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And move it to 9 o'clock?
Yep, I've got that down too. All the suggestions that we've heard tonight are all written down and we'll go.
Okay, we have, this matters before the committee, so
Excuse me. Make it a half hour before sunset. Did you,
Before or after?
before sunset, just you start setting your net? A half hour. I mean,
Okay, it's a suggestion.
So if you want to make a motion to
Good.
accept staff recommendation with changes that have already been suggested, let's hear it.
make a motion that, you do away with the season. Change the hours from a half hour before sunset until 9 a.m. And then all the rest will be in place, and then have an option of either a radar reflector or a light when you're in movie.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion from the committee? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next item, blue catfish. Chief, over to you.
Yeah, just, I want to thank John Balderson and J.D. Close and Nathan Everett. They've been in this since the beginning. They met with me 2021 about this. It started off with 4 the first year, 5 the second year, and we had 20 people do it last year. Of those 20, I think 13 of them fished. In the logbooks that they provided us, we told them what we wanted from them, and they provided, it was very good data. Chris and I personally put a lot of that information in the database and have looked at it. So, you know, I know firsthand what they were doing on a daily basis in that regard. So, and this is our whole premise behind when we do an experiment. Somebody comes to us with an idea, and then we say, let's try it. You know, and since I've been here, this will be the 3rd one that's gone up and hopefully become a regulated fishery. And as things change and markets change, that's what we should be doing. We should be trying to, you know, we should be evolving instead of dying. So, and I think this is a good example of it, but we want to make sure we do it right. Thank you. And so I think it's they've done a good job with this, and you know, I'm really supportive of moving forward with this time. So, before we get into the discussions about catfish and electrofishing, I want to just mention that the regulation changes provided tonight are those that will be going forth before the commission at the end of the month on February 25th. These recommendations take into account and consider both interest and request, as well as the public concerns and feedback we've heard so far. These recommendations are a big picture and seek to ward off potential public risks and concerns with conflicts. You know, we had a lot of issues last month with that, November when we talked. Your comments and the comments made tonight will be provided to the commission. We will do that. That's something we always do. That's why everyone's busy jotting things down over here. We encourage the FMAC to have representation at the commission meeting on the February 25th, whether it be the chairman, the vice chair, or someone else that you so desire, and have them, you know, come to the podium and say what we talked about tonight. Each one of you and the people in the public will also have the opportunity to put in written comment into our town hall. We'll have a address for that. You can put a written comment in there, but you can also come to the commission meeting and provide public comment on what we plan on doing moving forward. This is how you can voice your interest, your concerns, and your support of what we're proposing tonight. So all those comments, anything that's provided on town hall, any comments we get before the deadline will be given to the commissioners in advance. So they'll all have that in their books so that they can look at it. Those 9 members of the commission will be making the final decision on what the regulations will be. With that, I want to turn the presentation over to Alex Gavan, who will outline those proposed regulation changes that we as VMRC as its entirety are supporting. I expect this committee and the public to be respectful, because I mean, last meeting got a little out of hand at times, and show her the respect and the board, you know, and the committee, the respect they're due. So, turn it over to Alexa at this time. Thank you.
I think the problem is he's looking at you. We had this so many years with Rob. Oh. Hi everyone, I'm Alexa Galvan. So we discussed some background information on the blue catfish fishery and electrofishing last meeting, so I'm just going to get right into changes being proposed. So proposed changes include expanding the number of licenses from 3 to 10, expanding areas. This would include adding the Chickahominy River as a separate harvest area and adding the Mattaponi to the area that already includes the Pamunkey. Removing the maximum size limit and tolerance, so there would be no size limit on blue catfish harvested by electrofishing. And remove eligibility constraints for applicants. When this first went into place, we wanted to reach out to catfish watermen specifically, so we did have that you had to have a history of catfish harvest to be eligible for the lottery. This would remove that, so any commercial waterman could enter a lottery for an open license. So these are the existing and new areas. So the James River goes from the James River Bridge to Turkey Island. We'd be adding the Chickahominy, which are the purple lines. It would go from the mouth of the Chickahominy to Diaskin Creek. From the York River, we'd have the current Pamunkey, which goes to Broad Creek. And then on the Mattaponi, it would go from the, I believe it's the Route 33 bridge up to the Route 629 Walkerton Bridge. And then the Rappahannock would stay the same from the Route 360 Downing Bridge to the Route 301 Bridge. And then with our discussions about proximity concerns, it's being proposed to increase the buffer around boat ramps, piers, and where people are in the water from 100 yards to 300 yards. And that buffer would now be around all piers, public and private. And then to increase the buffer around fixed gears while keeping the buffer around all other marked fishing gear that are not fixed to, that would remain at 100 yards. And as Pat said, there's a few different public comment opportunities. Anyone is welcome to the February 25th commission meeting. You can make comments via the agency website. If you go to our website and go to agency meetings, the public notice for the February 25th meeting will have this link, or we can send it out to anyone who wants it. And then there's Virginia Town Hall, where they can also host public comments. And I can take any questions.
Mike?
What was the rationale for not including the Potomac tributaries?
For most of this fishery, we have been stuck by excluding the tributaries based on user conflicts, wanting to keep it to the larger harvest areas.
By square miles? I mean, what was the?
We've excluded all the creeks and tributaries on the James, and all the tributaries and creeks are
I
excluded.
mean, I understand, it's a kind of a big increase in area, but what was the negative part of not including the Potomac tributaries?
To be consistent with the other tributaries.
Okay.
And avoid user conflicts.
Yes, sir.
Both of them you added are useless. The Chickahominy is a few places you can raise fish. The Mattaponi is, not even worth going to. The tributaries are really where the fish are in early summer. If you want to help people, you should extend it to the tributaries. All the catfish people that catch catfish are in the main stems. The only people in the tributaries are bass fishermen, and they love to see catfish get taken out. So, if you want to really extend it, give us more upriver and give us the tributaries. Chickahominy and Mattaponi is nice if you don't know, but you'll know quick if you.
So, and this may get covered by the 300-yard bit because of where the boat ramp and piers are and stuff like that. But for example, there's a campground at the Route 5 bridge in Williamsburg. Used to have a boat ramp. I hope it still does. I plan on using it soon. How are you dealing with areas like that where it is a popular shore-based recreational area that may or may not have a pier at it, that is that you're going to open up to this? And I'm just concerned about user conflicts with that.
Well, the buffer is around
Yeah.
boat ramps. If that's there, we expect the more popular places will have boat ramps or fishing piers. And like I said, piers, we have widened the definition because there is some concern about what allows and does not allow a pier. So a pier, and we kind of worked with our Habitat division on this, would mean any non-commercial or commercial open pile or floating structure extending from the uplands channelward of mean low water. So anything that fits that bill would be a pier and would have the 300-yard buffer. And then the regulation, based on discussions with the commission, also includes where people are in the water. So if it's a common area where people are going to be swimming and diving.
I'm thinking bank fisherman type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not familiar enough with the area to give specifics. I'm sure you are, you've seen it when you're out there. My history out the Route 5 campground is ancient, so. But I do know I caught catfish there.
A lot of people with piers love to see us come there because these fish are structure fish. They like to stay around structure. And everybody don't like catfish. And a lot of people would like to see us fish around their piers and catch these fish away from it. It's only a very few, and I don't think I have hardly any complaints on the James, but the Pamunkey is full of piers, so you would not complete stretches of the river out for somebody like Chris, where he couldn't even work probably a quarter of his river. And to my knowledge, nobody up there complains about him fishing around his piers, their piers. And it would be so much easier if the people that had piers that didn't want us there could put a sign or something up, or buy a license, a $50 license, and then we would know which ones we couldn't go around. Because when you put a broad statement like that, I mean, you're knocking you're trying to give us more area, but yet you're taking a lot of our good area from us. So that's really a back step instead of going forward.
Thank you.
You're
And I
welcome.
will add for the context of the committee that we have received some concerns about electrofishing in proximity to piers. But as far as I know, I don't know of any specifically on the James or Pamunkey.
Tom, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Mike, you want to go first or any? So just a matter of procedure. So when we last met in November, we had suggested as a group, and there was some discussion about moving forward with user groups and having some, buy-in from the stakeholders. I didn't hear about any of that happening. Did that happen or?
No, it did not.
Okay.
We've been working on modifying our electrofishing plans for about 18 months now.
Gotcha.
And the decision was made to move forward with it, so that would have delayed the process.
I got you. All right. And then, interesting quote, if you don't mind, Alexa, not to put you on the spot or anything, but you said based on discussions with the commission. So a lot of this verbiage, came out, I guess, was within staff.
So that was actually, what I was referring to was when we initially brought this regulation to the commission, they had some concerns about safety.
Right.
And so they added the 100-yard buffer around, their wording was boat ramps, fishing pier, and where people are in the water.
Right.
So that was something the commission had us add when they approved the
You say commissioners, the appointed
the Virginia
commissioner?
Marine Resources Commission, when they
Gotcha.
voted to establish this regulation,
I
it was
gotcha.
with that language.
When was that vote?
Yes,
December
December 2019.
I got you. Okay.
Just a comment,
Hang on a minute. You had a question down here? Okay, Tom?
a comment about the user groups. I know the line that is marked in the James River was based on getting involved with the commercial charter, the charter cat fishermen, charter captains. They were involved with that back in 2019. They came in through the GIT, and then I encouraged them to show up here.
The boundaries of the river were not from the charter fishermen. Their concerns were mostly about the size limits.
It was also the boundaries.
The boundaries were mostly discussion with the Department of Wildlife Resources about where electrofishing would be worthwhile.
But it also made the cat fishermen happy.
You mentioned doing away with the maximum size limit. Is that the maximum size limit?
So
minimum?
there is no minimum size limit. We would be thrilled if people took the small catfish because there's a lot of them. There's currently a maximum size limit of 25 inches, which is about an 8-pound fish, as that's what the processors told us in 2019 they prefer up to, with some tolerance up to 28 inches. So if there's a few catfish in the boat that were 25 and a half, it was covered by a tolerance. This recommendation is one that came from the committee, would be to remove the maximum size limit and that tolerance. So someone who's electrofishing would not have a size limit to adhere to.
there wasn't any health aspects to that? The bigger
The-
fish, they tell me, are the least healthy for people to consume.
The Department of Health does have some health advisories on blue catfish. Since I don't have them in front of me, I will.
32-inch
Consumption.
fish.
So it depends where it's caught. I know like the health advisory in the James is different than, say, the Rappahannock. Since I don't have those in front of me, I'm not going to speak to them. But for some, it's do not eat over a certain size, and for others, it's limit to X meals a month. Those can be found in the Department of Health's fish consumption advisories.
Should we be telling them that they can keep a larger catfish, but they have to destroy it? It can't be turned in for consumption?
Then if you did that, then you would have the charter captains in the James River going nuts.
I don't care.
I mean, if it was a charter captain in the Chesapeake Bay going nuts, you would, and I think that's an unfair statement.
I wouldn't.
I mean, most of the bigger fish are gone after by the trophy fishery, which is catch and release. The charters are big on catch and release because they want more people to be able to get that experience of hooking the big one. That may be part of where the 1/32 that the Department of Wildlife Resources has in place.
And that's just Virginia, correct, on the 32 inches? I was talking to Ricky Nixon, they said they have no limit in North Carolina, so they do keep whatever size.
I don't know about North Carolina.
He said they process a lot of 30 to 50 pound fish, but there's really
Okay.
not a big market for them.
Yeah,
But
that's,
there's
we've
no size
heard
limit,
the
yeah.
bigger fish, not a big market.
Mike?
Just two things to make. One's on the consumption advisory. There's consumption advisories on blue line tilefish in the ocean, no more than 2 a month, on tuna, on swordfish. There's consumption advisories on striped bass, no more than 2 meals a month. And I've yet to see a restaurant or a grocery store see the consumption advisories on the wall or behind a menu. So there's consumption advisories on almost every single fish that we have. The question and the point that I have is, the purpose of the experimental fishery was to catch more blue catfish. And there's absolutely no question on the political drive to catch as many as we can. By not opening up the creeks, and as far as I know, there's no complaints from the bass clubs. I invaded the Rappahannock, Chickahominy, Pamunkey, and Mattaponi's Facebook websites, and I put on there, do you guys care if electric shocking comes up into your areas where you bass fish? And the answer was, kill them, catch them all, catch all the catfish. They're interfering with our bass fishing tournaments. So to me, this is a good step in the right direction since 2019, but it's still really restrictive in catching as many blue catfish as we can catch because of the geographical area limits. It's great to get rid of the size limit, but like George had said, and he is the king of the blue catfish, as well as Chris and Dave Johnson. And if they say that opening up the Mattaponi doesn't do them any good, what the areas that they want is, let's open up those areas, or we're just gonna keep coming back to this each year. So that's my comment. And I'm gonna make a motion that we open up more of the tributaries and the creeks, as well as some more clarity on or defining more of the 300 yards, because if it has to be 3 yards from anybody's pier, how much of the area are you restricting that was open before when it was 100 yards? The point that started getting too close to a pier came from the Rappahannock River up in Leedstown. A public fishing pier and boat ramp complained that the gillnet, the electric shocking was too close, and they called the Marine Police, who observed George doing it, and they gave him a ticket for being too close. So that went to Westmoreland County Court, and I wrote a letter to the Westmoreland County Commonwealth Attorney and gave him all of the regulations and explanations, and he said, I understand, Mike, I'm going to dismiss this and drop the charges But you've got to make sure, Mike, that this gets clarified in the regulations so that it doesn't happen again, that he doesn't get too close to this public fishing pier where there were people swimming off the boat ramp and there were people on the pier fishing. So, but this makes it that you have to stay away from all piers. And that instead of going forward with opening up the fishery, man, if you took a map of just the Rappahannock River and you broke, do a 300-yard box around every pier, how many square miles are now you restricting in that river? So it's much, much more restrictive. So I'm going to make a motion when we start the motions to change that 300 yards to stay away from public fishing piers, and maybe we have to put a $50 license on there that says public fishing pier, no electric shocking, but not for all piers. So two parts I'm going to make in the motion when we're.
Second that, Mike.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
The tributaries, what is the user conflict? What's the conflict exactly in the tributaries of the James?
I mean, I don't know about the James in particular, but when we began, we did have concerns of people that electrofishing would impact their gears, which is why we have these buffers around fishing gears. I can't speak to specifically what would be affected in those areas.
I mean, I'm kind of with him. I'd like to see every one of these fish gone.
I mean, I can see the buffer around fixed fishing gear and around the marked fishing gear, like the staff recommends. I can see that, and I was at the commission meeting speaking when it came 2019 to establish this and voiced the concern about people in the water, whether it's at the beach, water skiing, jet skiing. 100 yards seemed to be about the right number of yards to stand off, and that's worked. I'm sure George takes it a little bit further if he sees people in the water, just on the safety minded. So that seems to be enough away from people in the water. When it comes to the piers, boat ramps, I can see boat ramps and other people in the water, including beaches, like Little Beach in Chickahominy. I could see, steering clear of them. But when it comes to the piers, for simplicity, that's the simplest way to do it. But I'm not sure that's the right fit. So I'll open up to more discussion from the committee before opening it up to the public.
I was just, I think we need to be careful what we're asking for. I keep hearing everybody say, I wish they were all gone, I wish they were all gone. What happens when that happens? We've got all these boats and fishermen and gill netters and processors, and we're gonna build an industry.
We want to have a sustained fishery.
Right, but what happens when they disappear?
Yeah.
And everybody's out of business, so I think we gotta be careful what we're wishing for.
So I've mentioned previously, I'm on the invasive catfish work group with the Sustainable Fisheries Goal Implementation Team. And that's a lot of what we talk about is balancing goals. Right. Is that the recreational folks want more big fish and commercial folks want a sustainable fishery, and people who are concerned about prey species, they might want them eradicated. So it's definitely a challenge balancing all three, but we have a great group of people who work to solve problems and to make sure everyone's voices to those different sides are heard.
Well, anyone else next, Chairman?
Go ahead.
Were you next, Tom? Go ahead, yeah.
So, looking at my phone, you guys gotta get a better map than my phone. This campground I was talking about at the Route 5 bridge, there's only one pier, it's right next to the bridge. And then it's got probably 2,000 yards or 1,000 yards of shoreline that's part of the campground that faces Chickahominy River. Then it goes around to Gordon Creek, which I believe would be not open by your rules, by what you proposed, because it's a trip to the Chickahominy. Is that true?
Correct. They would have to stay in the main Chickahominy.
In the main Chickahominy. So one of the things you may consider adding, and I know this one, and I know Ed Allen's campground also has shoreline fishing, places where there's shoreline fishing, which is public or private campgrounds. And I don't mean somebody's got a 2-acre lot next to the water that they call a campground. I'm talking someplace that rents campsites or has them, you know, whatever. Should also have some kind of restriction from being along the shoreline. Just as a user conflict thing. I paid to come here for this weekend, and that man's out there, and I wanted to catch a cooler full of catfish to take home, and that man's out there getting them all on me, and I can't catch them today.
I mean, we would run into the issue of defining public and private campsites where someone who puts a tent up could say, this is a private
No,
campsite.
when I say
So that might be
so I
difficult.
would call it commercial or public campsite. And a commercial campsite is someplace that advertises to the public to come rent a space. And there aren't that many of them along these creeks. There's the Route 5 one, there's Ed Allen's, I'm not sure.
So Airbnb campsites?
No, these are 50 spots.
Yeah, it's, Tom, it's, the challenge there is recognizing it from the water. And Ed Allen's is in fresh water, it's DWR's regulation, it's above the levee. But
No, they just said open it up to, Ed Allen's is on the Chickahominy.
Lake Chickahominy, not the Chickahominy River.
Okay, well, there's a campground just
It's
downstream.
on the other
of-
side.
But
DWR's rules.
there's a campground, or used to be a campground.
Yes, there's another
just
one further on
Just
down.
downstream of the dam. And you're worried about conflicts, that's a conflict. People will go to those campgrounds and want to sit on the shore and cast a rod out and catch a catfish. Or a cooler full of catfish, for that
Are they
matter.
in the water?
What?
Are they in the water?
No, they're sitting on the shoreline.
Are their feet getting wet?
No, they sit on the shoreline in their lawn chair.
That first part covers it.
They're sitting on the shoreline in their lawn chair, with their shoes on usually, except for in the summer.
Any other comments? Staff, do you have anything else before I open it up?
No.
Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. If anyone wants to address the committee on this matter, come up, introduce yourself. Please come forward.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? My name's Christian Moore. I'm a charter captain on the James River for catfish. One of the reasons I come up here tonight is I was here at the meeting last November, and I know things got a little heated with some people talking. I believe I behaved myself very well, but one of the questions I wanted to follow up with you guys is it was mentioned that there was going to be some sort of secondary committee. I believe somebody asked about it earlier, to where the charter captains would be able to speak with the commercial guys in charge of the electrofishing. I'm just curious as to why that didn't get followed through with. That would be my first question.
Okay, once you finish, I can ask Chief.
Okay.
to come up and talk about that, but.
And secondly, with removing the size restrictions on the fish, for various reasons, someone, already noted on the health risks due to the high levels of keep-home, mercury, and PCBs, mainly in the James River. I've talked to a lot of commercial fishermen, and there's no really huge market for the large fish. So what is the reasoning behind lifting the creel limit? What's the purpose behind that? You, sir, mentioned you didn't care if you killed every one of them. Well, that would put me out of business and leave my family homeless, because that's how I put food on the table. And there's 30 other charter captains that work the tidal river regions of Virginia for catfish. They care. Their family cares. Their children care.
Mike?
I sell doe beers, I sell to Sea Farm. He has absolutely no issue with fish up to 20 pounds.
Mhm.
And he'll take some a little bit bigger if there's only 1 or 2 mixed in.
Sure.
And a 25, what is a 20?
A 20-pound fish is about 34 inches. So that's only 2 inches bigger than the
Understand,
current
and the
rule.
market is wide open for the 25-inch fish. And,
Sure.
and when we pull up a fish and it fits 2 pounds, that's 80 cents. When we pull up a 20-pound fish, that's a lot more money per fish.
Sure,
And
so why not change the inch? Why make it unlimited?
there is plenty of, somebody pointed, there's plenty of market for fish up to 25, 30 pounds.
Sure. What
Can't
about
have too
40,
many, but
50,
there's plenty.
60, 70
And then-
pounds?
And then when I looked at some of the charter guys' websites, you say catch a trophy rockfish, and most of the rockfish that I looked on their websites were 40 and 50-inch fish. You know, that's a trophy, and I don't think from a commercial waterman standpoint, a 26 or even a 32-inch catfish is a trophy.
Certainly not.
So if the interest is protect the trophy fish, is that right?
Correct.
So I think your question was, why are we trying to protect the 25 to 37-inch fish? And
No, you're misunderstanding me. You're trying to remove the 32-inch law completely, which would allow commercial vessels to harvest a 30, a 40, a 50, a 60-pound
we don't have a
fish.
32-inch restriction here.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, there is the 32
That's
inch.
DWR, not BMRC.
No.
No, BMRC, your current electrofishing regulation is 25 inches unlimited and then a certain number up to 28 inches. You're trying to relinquish that so you can catch any size fish. That makes no sense.
So we have a debate on what the regulation says. Staff? It's 32 inch.
25 inch.
25.
For electrofishing.
For electrofishing.
And they can keep
Electrofishing.
12 or 15 a day, up to 28?
To
10.
10 up to 20.
And that is it. All other gear types, gill netting, catfish pots, pound nets, no limit in Virginia.
Okay, would you still propose, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Would staff still be proposing that the 32-inch limit is, I believe you said one per vessel?
That's
Yeah.
not a
That's it.
BMRC.
Yeah, so the 32-inch would be one per, or it would be wide open?
That's what that proposal is.
That's what the proposal said.
Okay.
It waived the maximum size limit.
So I think what you're hearing is, and I'm gonna try to speak for what I think you said, is keep the 32-inch fish to very limited harvest.
No, I'm
Or 32 inches and larger.
I'm willing, I'm not saying cut it at 32, but you're opening it up to whatever.
Yeah, and so that's the question of where do you make the cutoff? If it,
Going
32,
from-
32 has a lot of, I want to say environmental people saying, yes, that's a good number because of the contamination.
Health Department in the James River only. The Virginia Department of Health had an advisory about 32-inch or larger blue catfish in the James River only. And that's likely where this 32-inch number came from in DWR regulations or somewhere else. It's not driven by anything else, and as a member of the commission, I'll tell you, we stick to our lane of Virginia Marine Resource waters. We stay out of DWR's business, and we stay out of the Army Corps of Engineers business, and we stay out of the Virginia Department of Health's business.
Right, but it's.
They want an advisory or restriction, then they can publish their consumption advisory or take advisory and do their thing, so.
But a substantial fraction of the James River where this fishery is prosecuted is above the line between fresh and saltwater licenses
Yeah.
for recreational
So there is,
fishermen.
the only, in any gear type, in all gear types in VMRC, other than electric shocking, there is no size restriction on blue catfish. With electric shocking, there is 25 inches, no more than 10. There is no 32-inch word anywhere in VMRC tidal water regulations that says 32. DWR has a 32-inch restriction of only one fish per day, and that's DWR's regulation.
Sure, but this fishery that is proposing with these 10 shock boats are fishing above the saltwater line in the DWR
No,
territory.
it's just roughly where the Surrey power plant is. You can't go above that.
I shared the river with this gentleman for the past 5 years. I know where he fishes.
Where's the proposed line in the James River?
Turkey Island.
Pardon me?
Turkey Island.
That's the part, no electric shocking above that.
Right, no trophy catfisherman fishes up there much. Most of the trophy catfishing is done around from Sturgeon Point down to the mouth of the Chickahominy.
So I just, I think your point was that there's no and maybe I misheard it. We don't have, you were questioning the commercial market for the bigger fish.
No, sir, I'm questioning the board or committee's proposal to relinquish the 32-inch krill limit.
We don't have that.
What you're proposing?
No, we're not.
Yes, you are. Yes.
That's what
For
staff
electric
has said.
shocking, nothing over 32?
Right now,
That's correct.
right now, it's, according to Mr. Tice, it is 1 over 32 is all he's allowed to keep per day.
That's a DWR regulation.
He can't keep any over 32, sorry. And staff is suggesting that the new regulation would be no limit, including over 32. And I'm suggesting that, I'm agreeing with this gentleman, that it is a reasonable thing to say, you can catch as many as you want up to 32. But once you get to 32, then you stop and you say that is reserved for this. And if staff is really worried about what if we want to get a sustainable fishery where we continue to feed the bottom of the fishery with little baby fish, those greater than 32-inch fish will contribute significantly to that. And we should be really trying to catch all the ones at 3 pounds for the recreational fishermen.
So, Alexa, is there a VMRC regulation that talks about 32-inch maximum size for blue catfish?
There is not.
Pardon me?
There is not.
There is not. And now we're talking about offering one? Okay.
What's it say, Pat?
It says.
Here's the confusing piece,
Any blue
if I may.
catfish greater than 25 inches in total length, except that up to 12 blue catfish per trip may be between 25 and 28 inches in total length. So for electrofishing right now, the limit is 25 inches, you're allowed 12 between 25 and 38.
38 or 28, did you say?
28
28. So there is no fish above 28 right now
in the electrofishing.
in the electrofishing. And what I'm suggesting is that it should be, I think, fine with the charter fishermen or the upriver charter fishermen to say no fish over 32 with, that's the word, that's where it stops. So if
Only for
Mr.
electric
Tice
fish.
catches 30 fish that are 30 inches long, he's fine.
I think when we try to bring rockfish back, what's the first thing we do? We cut the big fish out and get caught, because they're the big spawners. Why are we saving the big spawners in the James for something that
Because-
ain't even supposed to be there, that's eating the whole bay up?
So in the Virginia legislation today is House Bill 2782. And it was originally written by Delegate Hillary Pugh-Kent, who's my delegate, and it was subsumed by Delegate Shelley Simons of Newport News. 2782 has cleared the House, it cleared the Chesapeake Committee, it cleared in the House Ag Committee already, and it was voted by the House last week, 75 yay and 13 or so nay.
And 19 no votes.
And tomorrow that bill goes over to the Senate side. I was part of writing that bill, and it completely eliminates 32-inch maximum size of one fish a day, gets rid of that completely in all tidal waters of Virginia, except for the James River from Turkey Point up to Richmond is the only place. So what we're really doing is DWR gets rid of most of the 32-inch restriction, and then we adopt one here in VMRC and all tidal waters. It's like a conflict. And that just, if I was Joe Citizen reading the newspaper in this story, I'd think that's ridiculous. Why can't the two groups, work together? So,
If I may,
confused.
really quickly. So we're not talking about legislation here. We're talking about regulation.
Understand.
So I think what some of the issue is now we're having a bit of a back and forth. The point of public comment is to come up and say to the committee respectfully, this is what they would like to see. Let's not do this. We're not arguing regulation. We're not arguing legislation.
Sure.
Please, sir.
Yeah.
You let them know what you would want, and then y'all can discuss that. If you have questions for him, that's fine, but we're starting to get back
Yeah.
and forth.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You know, we're not here to answer your questions, but we'd love to hear what else you have to say, so
Yeah,
continue.
this question, may I speak? Is that good?
Mhm.
This is for Mr. Trice. With the electrofishing, George, what is specific about it that it only works on the catfish? How does that work?
The pulses per second, they don't have scales.
Mhm.
Can't raise the scaled fish.
Gotcha. So it's I guess their fleshiness where they don't have scales is what makes them susceptible.
Right.
So if you are allowed to go into like the creeks and stuff, how is that going to affect all the fish eggs for all the species of fish in the creeks?
Low frequency doesn't affect them.
It doesn't?
No, I talked to Patrick Cooney from Smith Root today before I come in here, and he said you would have to use high frequency, and you would have to sit in one spot for 10 minutes right on top of the larvae and stuff to affect them. As long as you're drifting with low frequency, it has no effect.
Gotcha.
And high frequency is not legal in this
And
program.
our units don't even turn up to that.
Gotcha.
We couldn't do it if we wanted.
Okay, and has the committee done researching where electrofishing has been proposed in other states throughout the United States? Have you researched it? Because I know a lot of
This is-
states have.
This is not a question and answer, this is public comment.
Gotcha.
So let's
That-
have your
that's-
comments.
Okay, that's just a concern I have, that's my comment. And then, I had one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, you cut me off. Oh, this was also for Mr. Trice. At the last meeting, we had spoke about, they had suggested having that committee where we work together. And I had voiced a concern to where when you guys are shocking in areas of the river, it renders the fish inactive and they don't feed for days at a time. Are you willing to work with us, the charter captains, in some sort of copacetic relationship so we can pay our bills as well?
If you haven't noticed, I try to stay away from where y'all fish a lot of times. I don't go to the spots I see y'all repeatedly. I mean, we both have to work. I try to give y'all space and not have conflict. I think I've done a fairly good job over the years doing that and being respectful to everybody. And, I mean, I don't even go nowhere near stuff I know where people go. And, I mean, it's hard when you're talking about a fish that moves.
Absolutely.
And
I know more about that than
yeah,
most.
but I try to be respectful to y'all, and I hope you see it. But
George,
Well,
thank you.
I would definitely like to develop a working relationship if this goes through, because I depend on these fish feeding to feed my family.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'd be willing to work with us.
I could probably tell you where the big fish are.
I could probably tell you where the small fish are. That's all I have.
All right, Cap, thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to voice their public comments? Please come up.
Hi everyone, my name's Olivia. This is my first time really talking up here. So I'm speaking as a multi-species recreational angler. I started paying attention to this back when the electrofishing just kind of got started. I was here in November. And then I've been kind of doing my own research. I've heard us discuss, some studies, some figures that went up. And what I found looking into this, because as much as I love catching large catfish, I also love catching other species as well. I really have an appreciation for it. I live up in Hayes. I'm in the Guinea Marshes. We're out. We love Mobjack. We're out on Back River. I've also fished the James and the York. That being said, I've been pulling these studies and reading them, and I guess in a bridge version, I could sit and talk your ears off for hours, on everything in these studies. I really enjoy scholarly articles and scholarly data. So I really went into it because that data and that science doesn't care about how you feel about it. And I think that is the best place to start with it. And what I found based off of biomass studies, consumption studies, and these figures that have been done, salinity tolerance studies, is that these larger fish, which I'm not talking like a 32-inch fish. I'm talking, what I'm looking at is like, I call them butterballs. The big girls, they move slow, they're super fun to catch, and I think they have not only a local appeal, but a national appeal as well. We see catfish tournaments come here, and I feel like it would be a disservice, not just to the charter captains, but to everyone who goes and frequents these waterways to look to destroy this very small fraction of the population unnecessarily when based off of all of these studies, and I have them all here, and they are all local studies through BIMS and the fisheries. I just think people and the recreational anglers are not being heard here. So what I've seen so far between Christian, I believe, and George, was a really, really respectful discussion between them, which is so important for me to see as, I'm just here. I don't have a horse in the race. I just like to catch them. I also like to catch bull red. I like to catch cobia. I like to catch striped bear. And I don't want to see any sort of fish be impacted unnecessarily. And right now, what I've seen based off of some of the other discussions too, is there's a lot of confirmation bias and bias being discussed. And I just don't think that's fair. You can feel any sort of type of way about it. I love the fish. I also, the little ones annoy me. I understand there's a large population. I've looked at the biomass studies for it. And, again, I'm just a person, but from the outside looking in, especially removing that size limit, it just does not make sense scientifically. It doesn't. They, in these studies, in the consumption studies, the highest consumption, so blue catfish reach reproductive maturity around 14 inches. It's also their highest, the ratio of consumption per pound of body mass is the 14 to around 24 inches. And it makes up a huge, huge percentage of the population of these fish. Consumption actually drops after 24 inches for these fish per pound. And with those larger fish making up such a small fraction of the population, it just seems irresponsible to, again, for me just sitting here and listening, it sounds like you're just okay with completely destroying a trophy fishery that has a lot of love from, again, it's not just here, it's nationally. I feel like, again, if we're making these decisions, we have to do so from as unbiased of a standpoint as we can. And, if anyone would like them, I did, unfortunately for my free time, sat and I read through every single study, every single word, every single method, and really looked at all the data, not just the highlights. And all of these articles were scholarly articles and scholarly research. And I thought they were very interesting. And it all points to, the issue being these smaller fish. And I think everyone agrees that we would like to see those numbers reduced, but I think completely eliminating a trophy fishery is not the way to do it. And I think we should make these decisions based on science and fact and data and not emotion. I respect everyone up here. I love being able to come up and talk. Sorry, I'm very nervous. I don't do well with public speaking, but it is just something that I am concerned about. And as much as I would, I would like to see the fish stay. I think there are compromises that can be made, but I don't feel like that size limit is it. I just don't think wiping out that, especially with it being such a small fraction of the biomass. And, they reproduce, the larger fish, they lay more eggs because they have a larger size. They don't reproduce more. These fish reproduce once a year. So it's keeping a fishery alive while mitigating the most impactful part of that population. I just don't see, especially, there is, some consumption advisories. I know there was just issues, it was a grant, I believe, that went out. One of the grant recipients to expand flash freezing is where I live, out in Hayes. So if you lift that and you have a consumption advisory, whether it's agreed with or not, that would, in the public eye, is a health risk. So we want to encourage people. I think they're delicious. The smaller fish are great. That's my personal preference. Not everybody's got to like them, But then you lift that, and now you have the potential to introduce that into the commercial market, whether they want them or not, and the public sees that. And they're like, oh, well, now there could be dirty fish in here. And it seems counterproductive for all the efforts that are going into expanding the, that kind of catfish economy that's going on in that market. And that's just me from a public standpoint. And I know there's a lot of worry about, migration out of the rivers. They want to, swim out, they're going to eat the blue crab, come back, or go wherever they're going. I pulled the salinity studies, and out of all of these rivers at any point in time, and it's primarily during the wet seasons, too many pages for me to look through, but it was done, the study was done spring, fall, and an average, a wet and a dry season. The only river that shows any sort of signs or probability of, and it's only the larger fish, the smaller ones can't tolerate the salinity, is the Rappahannock, and it's only during the wet seasons. And the only direction that from these studies that they can move is north up the Chesapeake. We don't want them doing that anyways, and that's how it looks like they would get around to the eastern shore from that. But with these other rivers being so close, it just doesn't. To me, it just doesn't quite make sense. If it makes sense, then by all means, like if they really are doing what you say they're doing, then deal with it. But again, from the outside looking in, from the public eye, again, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm kind of looking through it, my own, like more of a scientific lens. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm just a person, and I just happen to like reading these articles. So again, my concern is, really focusing in on those smaller fish and, respecting the trophy fishery at this point, because I believe that's a multi-million-dollar industry as well. It also benefits local hotels, not just the charter captains, the restaurants, the entertainment in the area. There are people that come from all over to fish for these, these large fish, and they are less than 2% of the population. With the actual, like the true trophy fish are a fraction of a percent. So, that's really all I had to say. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you guys have a great evening and think about it.
Okay. Thank you. Any others for public comments on this issue? Yes, sir.
I'm Chris Von Hatton. I do believe there should be a limit on the large catfish. I'm one of the 3 electro fishermen. I don't feel the need of taking those large fish. I would like to preserve those fish for spawning, because I'm not trying to eliminate them all out of the river. Put me out of business. I'd be comfortable with, maybe a little slot limit there, 32 to 35 inch. There's no point in keeping anything bigger than that, even when you're hoop netting or any other gear, because you're taking from other people also who do make a living off of it. And when it comes to increasing the number of permits, that has the 3 of us kind of slightly worried, because we have seen some drastic cutbacks in the efficiency of this gear, of the numbers we have been harvesting. And me and George just this year have tried in the Pamunkey River together, and we noticed once I went through a shocking area, he would go through and try again. Hardly nothing would come up. So if we do issue out more permits, and I have another person in my river, they come in right behind me, they ain't catching nothing, they're wasting their day. And we're going to run into even more conflict unless there is set areas for these new watermen with a permit. And as George is saying, the Mattapamai just ain't feasible. I've never tried there myself, so I don't know. I've only attempted with David Johnson over in the Rappahannock back in the spring, I think, or summer of this year. And we didn't do so well over there either. So there's a lot of issues with electrofishing on that terms. That might need to actually be a little more research into that before we go ahead and release more permits. Because at the end of the day, if it reduces my numbers in half, you're still only getting the same amount of fish coming out of that river. Me personally, George, before, when he could jump around to all 3 different rivers, how many pounds were you catching?
Probably more than both of us put together now.
Yeah,
Brian could probably tell you better than me, but.
What do you think you caught this year?
Don't have to say.
200.
Yeah, that's about where I was at. I know people hoop netting that far out exceed us. And it's almost to the point where I'm starting to get into hoop net fishing just to compensate.
All right, thank you. Any others? Okay, before I turn it over to the committee, Chief, if you wanted to address that one question about the working group. I think you've already addressed it once, but if you could restate.
Yeah, I think I did, but maybe Mr. Moore didn't hear me. Like I said earlier, we've been working on modifications to the regulation for about 18 months. And the plan was to move forward regulations this month. Was what, it was on the schedule, it kept moving around, and it landed in this month. So if we were going to go ahead and have that work group, we would have had to delay that process. That's part of the reason.
Okay.
And especially, what the motion was to look at proximity. That's what the motion was before the board. You all said to us to look at proximity. Well, we addressed that in this regulatory change.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. All right, this matter is before the committee.
When you say proximity, you're talking about proximity to
All those
piers,
areas we were talking about.
piers, boat ramps.
The,
okay.
the offsets that were on the first chart.
Those.
Discussion from the committee? Jeff?
If we increase the size limit to the minimum size of a trophy fish, which isn't 32 inches, as I understand from the witnesses we've had, there's still gonna be a trophy fishery, there's still gonna be a small fishery for the electric shop. I don't see where the problem is. It's gonna be a healthier, large fish, but we're still gonna have small ones because the larger ones are gonna spawn a lot, and they'll always be there. Thank you.
Go ahead.
You okay, Tom? with me? All right, so I'm gonna try to be quick, but the first thing I wanna do is compliment the speaker. I didn't get her name or forgot it. Young lady, you did a great job. You saved your first time. I encourage you to speak in February, and everyone here, and I'm sure the chairman will remind y'all that that's where you're gonna have another chance to speak. But the thing I wanna do is just kind of, and I don't mean to, it is what it is. Remind the group of why we're here. And I can send pictures. I want to get your cell phone, Tom, number and show you a picture of a catfish we caught last spring. Doesn't matter who I was with. I'm not going to go into it unless he wants me to later. But we caught a catfish that was about this big. In that catfish, the fish was still digesting it as much as he could, as fast as he could, I guess. It was a speckled trout. We removed the speckled trout. It was a 2-pound speckled trout. It was about this big. It was over half the length of the catfish that ate it. That picture generated so much traffic and generated so much emotion with people. I'd never seen anything like it. I had 2 high school students with us on the boat. But what it did was remind us and reminds me of why we're here, and that is that we have a fish that is eating other fish that people like to catch. And there are a lot of other fish, striped bass, speckled trout, white perch, largemouth bass. And in all this discussion and a lot of user input, which is valuable, I'm not taking that away. That's why I valued those committees that we were gonna have. But the bottom line is we have one fish that's not supposed to be here that's eating our crab industry. It's eating speckled trout, it's eating, and so that's why we're here. And that's why it's I just want to remind everybody that, I get it, that there's a trophy fishery that's developed, and I encourage everybody to come out in February. State your case. But my case that I wanted to remind everybody is why we got here. And that is that these things have been proven, and the research is there, that they are eating and moving into salt water way more than they ever predicted. Ever. It was the last thing on people's mind that they would have moved into the salt water like they have and eaten the speckled trout, the striped bass larvae and the fry. So, just remember that, that's how we got here. And if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. And if anybody wants those pictures, I'd be glad to send them to you. But the tail of the speckled trout was still sticking out of that catfish's mouth, and the head was partially digested. So, they're voracious. And, there's a lot of people with heartstrings attached to the speckled trout fishery. And that's what you're up against, those of you who love catfish. You got people who love both fish, and they're butting heads here. So, come out in February.
But,
Tom, you had your
but
hand up.
didn't we just have a cold shot kill on speckled trout?
It's got nothing to do with it, Tom, don't
And
muddy
this
the water.
year,
We're
if it
already
was this
muddied
year-
there, but we've had cold stun events. I knew that, I thought that we would go silently through that good night with this
And-
cold stun event.
Yeah, that's a-
There's
that's
still
a-
kind of
that's
events,
another
1,000, we've had thousands of years of
hang
cold
on,
stun
hang on, so
events.
let me put an end to this. We haven't had a catfish cold stone event, so
Yeah, I agree.
based on the topic now, Tom,
First
what
off-
do you got?
Okay, first off, I agree that the electroshock guys should be able to kill as many fish as they can to a moderately large size.
Can I record that?
Blue catfish wise, blue catfish, stay away from my speckled trout. But in public water. But, to say that, you know, oh, we're here and we've got all these fish, no, it's not this is a big mistake and all that. This is where we are today. Today, we have this species that is out there in large numbers. We do need to do something to try to help reduce the numbers, and doing a commercial fishery is a good thing. Developing the cutting houses and such so that we can market the fish, that's a great thing to do, and I'm glad to see that's happening, because that was one of the big limitations early on. I do think we should try to do what we can to maintain this trophy fishery, which brings a lot of people into the state for it and brings income in. I am concerned about areas where recreational fishermen pay to stay and like to fish from the shore. And I know, for example, that Route 5 campground at least used to be one of those places. And I'm sure there are a number of other ones that staff can identify. This is a commercial campground on the shoreline. You know, keep these guys at least 100 yards or 200 yards away from that shoreline would be good. You know, at least as far as the person can cast. I think that we should get rid of this slot between 23 or 25 or whatever it is, and 32, 34 inches, some number like that. Once this legislation passes, it gets rid of the 32-inch limit, assuming it gets out of the Senate. That it would be good to do that. I don't know that staff should do that before the legislation passes, but it could pass this week. It's a short session, isn't it? So we should know by the time the commission meeting gets here. So if the commission meeting gets here, maybe you make the limit 34 inches or some number like that. And then above that, it's a limited number. But that gives you fish that are marketable, that are good size, and you're less waste on that part of the fishery. And it's kind of where it is. I mean, I'm really concerned about him coming up onto unknowingly someplace that's got somebody in a really expensive RV who went there so they could fish, and they see you come by and just get all grumpy. But so that's where that is, and the only thing I would add to what staff has done, well, the two things are, sure, make it go, get rid of that 25-inch limit, which I think is what staff has recommended, and just add campgrounds to that where you can identify the campgrounds, just like we've done a lot of other things.
All right, thank you, Tom. Anyone else? We'll function on motions. Mike?
Can I make one more suggestion? I'm sorry, about if there are citation program here, maybe considering where that citation mark is on these trophy fish.
We don't do the citations for catfish, that's
I'm just saying
DGIF.
as a size, kind of, as a size mark to consider in the future.
Again,
Yeah, hang on a minute, Tom. You can address the staff up here. You can talk to them about the citation program, and they can steer you in the right direction, okay? You had something.
So I propose a two-part motion. The first part is, can you go back to the slide that talked about the piers?
That's what I was gonna say.
One of the offsets.
Yes,
This one.
so, I mean, what I wrote was, 300 yards from a commercial public campground with pier, swimming area, and shoreline, et cetera. Then I said, well, why don't we just say, for that, to come up with a definition that does not include every privately owned pier, just the ones that we have been talking about, that Tom mentioned. Just come up with a definition that applies just to that. And if that commercial properties have to get a specific license and a sign out front that says, George, stay away, or no electric shocking, then okay. But just certainly not for every single pier, because you're gonna really cut away at the square miles that electric shocking can be conducted. That's part A. And then part B is to match the DWR, the legislation that is going to say no fish, only one fish over 32 inches above, and I can't remember which point, I think it's College Point, George knows what it is. But in the James River, and that 32-inch maximum size, one fish only over 32, commercially caught in any gear type, only applies to that part of the James River and not all of the other rivers, because the majority of the charter boat trophy fishing is in the upper James River. So that is my two-part motion.
Let me ask.
I think I'm gonna need to write these down.
Yeah, let me ask staff, Chief Greer, the legislation, if it passed, that will trump what we're doing here.
No,
No?
it just directs DGIF, and it does not say what you just said as far
Okay.
as
It's directed at DWR.
DWR.
WR,
okay.
yeah,
All right.
whatever they're called.
2782.
I just read it, and you, please restate what you said, and I'll,
It says to amend.
no, just the part about what the regulation says.
The House Bill 2782 says amend DWR regulations to, this is, I can't quote.
It said, what I just read said eliminate the 32-inch maximum size is what it said.
Yes, but.
It doesn't say anything else.
Doesn't it say the James River?
It might say the James River, but you added a little bit more into it. I'll find it or staff, you got a computer out there, somebody look it up.
House Bill 2782.
Mike, can you please restate your motions?
Okay, the motion is is 300 yards from any, and you guys will define special pier. Special pier includes commercial campground, swimming, boat ramp, fishing area, public type campground. So 300 yards from that type pier only.
I need you to go a little slower since I'm trying to take this down for voting. So I have 300 yards from any, staff needs to define a special pier, which includes campgrounds, swimming areas.
I think the common word that staff uses in regulations is public fishing pier. That's used in, I don't know what else it is, but that's the words that are used to mean that.
But if I would go out on my pier and put up a big sign that says public fishing pier, how would the Marine Police interpret that if I called them and said, George is out in front of my pier?
That's the current problem.
That's what we're trying to solve.
So I'm saying, define that special pier to eliminate that confusion. And if that means issuing that business a license to protect their area, then so be it.
Tom, the regulation is through Wildlife Resources, to regulate, to remove the one fish daily, limit for blue catfish longer than 32 inches in the tidal waters of the James, Rappahannock, and York River and their tributaries below the fall line.
So that's the regulation you're saying, and you added a little bit more in there in your motion, and that's why I just wanted it clarified if you're using that as part of your motion.
Mike, does this capture your part one?
Yes.
And then your part two,
On the 32-inch, match the legislation coming from coming for House Bill 2782. And that really, if law enforcement was here, I think they would nod their head, that it is really easier to enforce one common law and not have to worry about where you're at.
well, for our part, I'm gonna say, I don't think we can match something that's not approved yet, but
Then you've
we
got 2
can
more weeks to
keep it
send
in
they
mind.
close.
So does this capture your part two?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really motion.
I'm gonna put it back up.
Just to clarify, if we take out the size limit in the electrofishing, the MRC will not have any regulations on size for catfish, and we would default to DWRs if that's what they have.
Then amend number 2 and says 32-inch size limit. Only one fish over 32-inch for electric shock only in the James River above the
Mike, you can't
tidal
do that.
water.
Mike, if this bill passes, the 32 is in all 3 tributaries and the creeks below the fall line. So you're altering, you can't alter anything from that. You can't, you can make whatever motion you want, but that's what the law will be.
Match the legislation.
Do you want me to take out the second clause?
So, Mr. Chairman.
This is your motion, I'm just trying to
Understand.
put up here what you're making a motion for.
Let's get what you got up here as accurate as you can, so we can discuss it.
Recommend 32-inch size limit to match the current legislation in assembly and allow 1 over 32 inches in the James River only. Is that your motion? Oh,
The,
Next one.
I haven't looked at the wording of the legislation since it went through the Senate Agricultural Committee yesterday, and
That's what he just read, though.
Just read the summary that was passed by the House. No.
So, okay, I think this motion needs a second and then a discussion.
I just need confirmation
Need
this
to
is the
define
current
the motion
motion.
first, okay? This,
the second part is not, they'll completely agree on that, yes. I saw you took
Okay.
the James River out of that, yes.
okay. That's what's up there. Tom, did you have something?
It doesn't have a second yet.
No, it does not.
Okay, so, I mean, my statement, if I was going to try to modify this, would be, comma, assuming that it passes. Now, the second question is a discussion part, which I'll wait until after you get a second. If it doesn't pass, what do we do with this? What does staff do with this recommendation? Although I
Any
think
other
it's gonna
discussion
pass.
on this? Is there a second to this motion? Last call in a second?
Special pier, staff defines a special pier. If it said licensed fishing pier, obviously a business, a campground business, and a public boat ramp, could you do that, Mike?
The problem is we don't have licensed fishing piers. We would have to create
You do
a
have licensed
license
fishing piers.
for a fishing pier, which would open a whole new can of worms.
I got you,
You
okay.
do have a licensed fishing pier, it's the ones where you don't have to have a fishing license to fish on it.
That's saltwater.
Oh, and saltwater, not freshwater does not have it, you're right.
Chickahominy, you can just walk out and fish, but you have to have a freshwater license.
Yeah, so I would suggest that instead of special, you say public fishing pier. And a public fishing pier from a VMRC regulation is not one that's there by riparian rights. And it's open to, a public fishing pier is one that's open to the public to use.
Right, I mean,
Yes, if somebody wants to let anybody in the neighborhood come and fish off their pier and call it a public fishing pier, that's a separate issue, but I don't think you're gonna get a lot of those.
Chairman, I apologize. I violated Robert's rules and opened a can of worms. You're looking for a second, correct?
I am looking for a second. I have not heard one.
Yes, sir, I
So
apologize.
last call for a second to the motion that's pending. Anyone online have a second? Okay, then motion does not move forward. Do I have any other motions?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
All right. Yeah, what was wrong? Can anybody speak up? What was wrong with either one of those two?
I'll speak up for the man in the back who was here and the young lady. It is contrary to Virginia trying to maintain a trophy catfish fishery. That would be my statement. And I think that the people who are pursuing this fishery would be fine to say, one fish over 32, and as many as they want up to 32 of any size would be a fine way to pursue this fishery.
If I may.
So,
So I think we're getting really wrapped around the axle here. So last time we brought this to FMAC's recommendation was to form a work group to discuss this because it is so in-depth and complicated that you all were not coming to consensus before. I don't believe you're gonna come to consensus tonight. So if you have something specific that you would like changed about this regulation, may I suggest that you come to the commission meeting and represent yourself in that way? Because I just don't see you guys at this point coming to a complete consensus on a recommendation when your recommendation before was we need more time to think about it as a group.
Okay, Shauna, if you can push up the slide before that, the one Alexa had.
A few more.
Well, this one. Was there any consensus to any of this?
I would like to raise a concern about this, and it's something that.
No, I asked for consensus. If there's any consensus on the expanding number of licenses or the areas. The size limit, we've beaten this dead horse a number of times. The eligibility constraints of applicants, we have no consensus on any of that. Or do we? Mike? Because we seem to be wrapped on the size, and it's the same discussion we had in November. We got pages of it here, you know. And so if we can't come to consensus on this and have a defined motion to move forward as a recommendation to the commission later this month, then we'll move forward with other business, okay?
And we will still carry forward your first recommendation. That's not dead. We will still carry that forward.
Tom, go ahead.
Okay, expand the number of licenses from 3 to 10. My concern is right now, what I heard during the public comment from two of the people that pursue this fishery is that may be moving too fast because it starts to get it to where they will make it so that, you know, they got 6 people trying to fish the same general area because it's close to where they can land and all that kind of stuff. And they'll start bumping into each other and all that. I think that we should, if you're going to expand the number of licenses, do it in a stepwise manner with a lottery, just like you discussed, and go from 3 to 6. And if that doesn't have any problems, come back in a year or two and say 6 to 9 or 6 to 10, because we know that it works with 6.
Is that a motion, Tom?
Yes. So that's one motion.
You want to restate that
Please.
succinctly?
On the 3 to 10, start with 6, expand it to 6, and then revisit it after you find out if that's starting to be too much. That will allow other people to get in and not have it such a limited fishery, allow more people who want to get in it. Furthermore, when you write the regulation for that, you get a permit, you have to buy the gear, I imagine costs $10,000 or $20,000. You have to buy the
Okay,
equipment to do
your
it.
motion is to expand the licensing
Expand the
from
licensing.
3 to 6.
From 3 to 6, with the condition that anybody who gets one of those licenses has to buy the gear the first year they get that license.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll defer to the chief.
Or has
but-
to pursue the fishery the first year.
Well, that's actually already in regulation, sort of. If they don't have harvest in a year, they don't get the license the
But
next
harvest in the year using this gear.
year. Correct.
Okay, that's fine.
So your motion is to expand from 3 to 6 licenses.
Right, for the first year, and then reconsider after that.
Does this,
Yes. So go back to your previous slide. Okay. Expand areas, I'm fine with that. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I don't know if it'll do any good this year, but, 3 to 5 years from now, that could be a good idea. I mean, it could be loaded up with fish and you wanna catch them all, or catch a substantial fraction.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Anything-
can make a suggestion,
Please.
I would take each one of those items one at a time, make a motion, clear the floor of that, and go on to the next
Okay.
item.
Okay.
So first, is there a second to the first item, which was expand licensing from 3 to 6?
I second it.
All right, there's a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Anybody online?
How about abstain?
anyone online?
Any abstentions?
Extension.
Do we need to raise hands? I
Yeah,
think
let's
we need
do
to
that.
raise
Can we do that
hands.
again on the,
Scott?
who's for it?
I believe we need to raise hands so staff can count.
All right, very well. All in favor, raise your hand.
I can't raise my hand, but I am in favor, and I think the staff done a good job with the compromise they came up with. We're not gonna get everybody a good consensus, but I certainly believe you're gonna get a majority.
All right.
That's
So
7-4.
That's 7.
And abstain?
Any opposed? 1, 2, 3. And abstentions?
I'm just not voting.
Two abstentions. 3 abstentions. Okay. That motion passes as a recommendation to the commission. Second item.
Okay, pull back your list. Expand the areas, add Chickahominy and Pamunkey River and Mattaponi as well. And my comment on that is, it may not be worth it now, but if these fish go into those river systems, like I expect, in 3 to 5 years, we'll be happy to have it open.
But how about the creeks? Can we get the creeks so when it's blowing, we don't have to stay in the main stream?
I would like to, that's a staff question, I don't know the right answer.
It's your
It's a
motion.
conflict issue.
Tom, that was your motion, correct?
To open up the Pamunkey and the,
As staff recommended.
as staff recommended, yes. And what he was asking about was about the creeks and the tributaries to these rivers, and I don't know enough about that one to
Is
make
that
a
a-
motion. Yes,
Is that a friendly amendment or
that's,
what?
okay. We can call it an amendment, I think staff wanted us to vote on these one at a time, so.
Well, we
the
are
creeks.
voting on expanding the areas. The motion's on the floor.
For the Chickahominy.
There was a
and Mattaponi.
suggestion about tributaries. I'm asking if that was a friendly amendment to your motion. That has not been
I'm not accepting that
seconded.
as a friendly amendment at this point in time.
You don't get the motion and second, okay?
No, but the friendly amendment, I think I get to say yes or no before it goes to motion.
So was that George's to open to tributaries as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you did not want to add that at this
I do not want to add that at this time.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay. Then that's not included.
Concerned about tributaries because there's too many houses and
Okay,
stuff.
is there a second to that motion?
I second that.
All right. Any discussion on this? Support area expansion of Chickahominy and Mattaponi. Any discussion? All right, can I see a show of hands? All in favor? You got 1, 2, 3, 4.
That was 5.
Say again?
I believe that was 5.
5. Any online? Any in favor online?
I'm in favor.
Okay, that's 6. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Right here.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That motion passes as a recommendation to the commission.
Kind of. Does not, but it passes without a majority.
That's true. Say again?
Doesn't matter, Robert's rule, it passed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
pass.
but you may note to the commission that it was not with a majority.
We'll show the votes.
Is there any other motions?
Next slide. No, the one, yeah, there you go. I would say that we expand, the buffer right now is 100 yards.
Yes.
I would say 150 yards and not 300. And I would include campgrounds or public campgrounds or something along those words, that public/commercial campgrounds.
How's that?
Yes.
Which buffer was that on your slide?
Buffer around piers.
Existing one.
The first one?
Yeah.
It's the
Around-
So
existing
it should say something around piers and.
And what about the fixed fishing gear versus marked fishing gear?
Oh.
There were 3
Do you have that in
categories.
the regulation now?
There were
No,
piers,
right now,
the original
it's-
recommendation was piers at 300 yards, fixed fishing devices 300 yards, other fishing gear types 100 yards.
It's currently 100 yards from all marked fishing gear. The current proposal is to increase the buffer around fixed gear to 300 yards. All other marked fishing gear remains 100.
I have no knowledge about what to do about fixed fishing gear.
So basically, it comes down to Wayne Fisher, who's got the big bulk of pound nets, and if Wayne is listening, he'll say, Mike, thanks for looking out for me. He wants as much as possible distance from pound nets, which are fixed fishing gear. And that's really the only fixed fishing gear that is fishing for these blue catfish. So, and that's primarily in the Rappahannock, but, so his request is as much as possible, and if staff recommended 300 yards from fixed fishing gear, then that makes sense to me.
And it makes sense to me too. And I think that's true.
You don't have a problem with that? I don't,
Yeah.
I mean, the piers is what bothers me. 'Cause
Yeah.
It don't affect me, but it knocks a third of Chris's.
And regarding the, you said fixed fishing devices and other gear was 100 yards. Was that part of your motion as well?
Yes, but public commercial campgrounds and fishing piers, and that public commercial is important about the piers.
Say again?
Public, commercial campgrounds and fishing piers.
What about crab pots? I mean, I know that classifies as commercial gear, but I have an issue in the Pamunkey with crabbers up there. I mean,
Okay,
they-
hold on, sir. We've had an opportunity for public speaking on this issue. It's before the committee.
This says 300 yards from fixed fishing gear, and staff already has 100 yards in regulation that we're not talking about changing. Is that right? And that was nets. wasn't
That
it?
was other gear types.
So what is,
Is that, is the
What?
marked fishing gear also gonna be 150 with your motion, or are you still keeping that at 100?
I have no idea with that. But I agree that it shouldn't be crab pots. Because then what you'll do is get people set cinder blocks with a crab pot buoy in and tell you can't electrofish there.
All right, Tom, is that your motion
Yes, those are motions so far.
so far?
Well, no, I mean, that I can come up with, that I think are supportable.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
All right, discussion on the motion to expand buffer to 150 yards and include public, commercial campgrounds and fishing piers and 100 or 300 yards from fixed fishing gears. Any
And that
discussion?
assumes that we maintain the existing regulation that says 100 yards from marked fishing gear.
The motion is what's written there.
That's right.
That
So
is
this
all
is-
that we're,
this is-
excuse me, let me speak. That's all that we're voting on. That is the motion.
That's right, to add this
No.
to the regulation.
That's the motion, nothing else, okay? And there's a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Are you guys recording this? 1, 2, 3 in favor.
Anyone on the phone?
All right, any opposed? Say again? Alexa?
I'll support it. You asked on the phone, I'll support it.
Okay. Those opposed? Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion carries with 4, 0, and 9 abstentions.
That's all the motions I got that I can come up with.
Okay. Is there any other motions on this topic before the committee? Hearing none?
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Does that clarify any of the trouble we got in last year on where we can go and where we can't go after reading that?
I believe we're still gonna have to play with
That was our original
definitions.
intent, George.
Because I'm just as confused now as where I can and can't go now as before, but,
We'll make sure it's clear.
We would have to work on definitions for that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comments for any items that have not been on the agenda. Is anyone here who wants to speak on an issue that has not been before the committee this evening?
I do.
Go ahead.
So, in years gone by, and I'm not sure, I mean, it's still mid-February, hopefully we don't have another couple of weeks like we did a few weeks ago. We had a speckled trout kill up in the northern neck area, I understand, or at least I heard about it. I don't know how far that extended, I'm hoping not bad. In years gone by, when we've had very horrible, or very major cold water stun kills for speckled trout, the commission closed the fishery until after the first spawn. Or at least shut it down a lot, I don't remember which. And I would hope that the staff will keep an eye on this concept and, you know, if it was only the northern neck that had it, I know Pocosin River was partially frozen, which hasn't happened in a few years, but it wasn't frozen all the way across, it was just in the shallow water. And if we do have another one like that, skidsies, if we can get the commission to do something to give the fish a chance to spawn just once. It worked when it happened before.
Okay.
There was no way to track if it worked. No way.
Good,
There's
Tom.
no way to calculate.
It's
the
just,
effect.
it's a discussion and it's
Feel
for staff.
good.
Okay, any other,
Can you see that? Those are the water temperatures. The problem is, we do not have any surveys in this, we have no fisheries independent surveys to determine what percentage died.
Right, but, well, when it happened before, in the Elizabeth River, some diver went out there and the bottom was covered with dead trout.
That's fine, but we don't
And
know.
I don't think that's happened this year because it's not as hard or as long.
The Warren Rudy Inlet had some mortality as well.
Yeah,
This is just showing those two lines on there, what North Carolina uses, 41 degrees for more than 8 days and 37.4 for 24 hours. We were below the 41 days for 27 days. So, but, you know, we don't have anything, we have no, we could do that, but
you're not getting the same reports like you did back in whenever it happened really bad.
If you guys want us to put something forward, we could put, you know, we can have a plan where we have reports, you know, that's what North Carolina does, people report them in, but North Carolina has a ton of data to support everything they're doing.
Yeah, and what I had not heard, when this happened before, we heard about commercial fishermen going out there with dip nets and making a good day with dip nets, getting the fish that were stunned and on the surface.
okay,
and all
let
that.
me interrupt and say this is public comment, not public discussion.
Okay.
Tom, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Chief, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Alexa?
So in case the committee doesn't meet again before the end of April, the February Black Sea Bass season is currently in swing. And just want to see if the committee supports extending the mid-season closure to make up for any February landings, if there's not, for some reason, an outsize payback needed this year. Just, we can't have email meetings, and we might not want to have a one-issue 5-minute meeting. So if nothing unusual goes on with the February fishery, do you support doing what we've done in the last 2 years?
Which is a closure in August, is it not?
July to August.
The end of July to into August, some amount of days. What's the consensus of the committee?
There's currently a closure there to account for a 10% cut we had to take a few years ago. So there is already a mid-season closure. It would just be extending that by however many days needed.
Committee's thoughts?
Skip? Yes. Just like
Yeah.
we've been done the last couple of years.
Okay,
Okay.
that's all I needed. Thanks.
Not having any other business without objections, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, staff.